There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thanks. Please be seated. The first item on the order paper is questions addressed to the Deputy President. Members may press the talk button on their desks if they wish to ask a supplementary question. And I wish to remind honorable members that the names of members requesting supplementary questions will be cleared as soon as the Honorable Deputy President starts answering the fourth supplementary question. The first question has been asked by the Honorable Steenhuisen, and I recognize the Honorable the Deputy President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our response to the first question. As government, we have sound legislative framework and robust legal instruments to advance sound financial management, as these were precisely designed to inhibit irregular and unauthorized expenditure. In terms of Section 38, 1A, Roman figure 1 of the PFMA, the accounting officer of a department must ensure that the department has and maintains effective, efficient, and transparent systems of financial and risk management and internal control. The responsibility to strengthen financial controls and implement sound financial management lies with the accounting officers of a department. However, provincial government departments have to strengthen their capacity, tighten their processes and internal controls, which will enable compliance with the key legislation, resulting in sound financial management and ultimately improved service delivery to our people. What this requires, Madam Speaker, of all of us as public representatives, as well as officials in the public service, is to exercise the necessary political and administrative leadership that is based on a culture of honesty, ethical business practice, and good governance. We should be uncompromising of anyone who violates internal controls, and where these controls are weak, they should be strengthened. We must ensure that all of us individually commit to accountability, good governance, and consequence management if we are to achieve our objective of clean government. We must be able to deliver the necessary service to our people who need them most. Our call as government, therefore, is for all our national and provincial departments to implement the recommendation contained in the Auditor General's report so that we can strengthen our accountability and improve our capacity to deliver services. However, Honorable Speaker, we are still concerned about the level of unauthorized expenditure, which continues to indicate weaknesses in our systems of internal control. However, we are pleased that it reflects a downward trend compared to 2013 levels. The unauthorized expenditure in provinces has decreased considerably over a period of 5 years by over 10.2 billion. when comparing it to March 2013, which was at 14.9 billion, and now it's standing at 4.7 billion. Provinces are managing to contain levels of over-expenditure by implementing cost containment measures and ensuring that personnel expenditures are kept at the required level. More work still needs to be done to eliminate unauthorized expenditures. Our National Treasury is working closely with provinces to ensure that budget commitments in provinces do not exceed available resources. Expenditure is closely monitored through in-year monitoring reports to provide early warning signals where internal controls are beginning to collapse. Our major concern is the occurrence of irregular expenditure, which continues to point to weaknesses in our supply chain management environment across government. Irregular expenditures occurs mostly as a result of non-compliance to supply chain management policies and procedures. In this regard, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer continues to implement initiatives that are aimed at modernizing public procurement through the use of technology to automate procurement processes and simplify processes in a manner that ensures that compliance is improved. The central database system is a critical platform to verify, validate institutions and individuals who can provide goods and services. This continues to be an important mechanism that lays solid basis for strong internal controls to prevent fraudulent and bogus transactions. National Treasury is supporting provinces by providing them with guidelines on how to deal with cases of irregular expenditure, unauthorized expenditures. It has recently developed a compliance framework to assist all accounting officers and accounting authorities of PFMA-compliant institutions to improve their level of compliance. More importantly, National Treasury is working with provinces to build the necessary capacity of supply chain management practitioners through the provisioning of ongoing training interventions. Over and above these measures, Madam Speaker, government is committed to rooting out corrupt malpractices where supply chain management processes are violated to benefit individuals. Where wrongdoing has been detected, the law must take its course. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
I believe Honorable Breitenbach will take the follow-up question on behalf of Steenhuisen. I see Honorable Steenhuisen's hand waving in the air, and I'm therefore recognizing Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Deputy President, what I would have liked to ask you today is whether you had anything involvement to do with the secret meeting that took place in Durban this last weekend. But that would have been a new question, so let me ask you this. It has become very obvious that Bosasa, a company that has benefited from billions of rands worth of government contracts, has been throwing around substantial largesse, upgrades to homes, and generous gifts to members and officials of the governing party. So far, the scandal has engulfed provincial government, members of the House, as well as members of the executive. My information is that the net of rent seekers will extend even further into the government benches in the coming week. None of this largesse or gifts have been declared in the register of members' interests, and there have been significant conflicts of interest that have resulted, where the financial controls and sound financial management systems that you've outlined today have been bypassed. Why has your government, after 3 weeks of the scandal engulfing South Africa, not uttered a single word about the scandal and its obvious implications for many of the initiatives which you've outlined today?
The Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you very much. Well, when it comes to government departments, there's one legislation that guides our work, that is the PFMA. It calls upon all accounting officers to do certain things. Now, if those things, if there are violation of certain prescripts of the PFMA, the necessary thing to do, those are reported. And all of us as members of this House, we are playing an oversight to the work of the executive. That goes the same with provinces. They've got legislatures. Now, reports of unauthorized, irregular expenditures get presented. In our case here, they get presented to SCOPA, and follow-ups are made. If there are violations that necessitate, that shows criminal activities, now those must be reported and the necessary actions must be taken. So I have heard that Busasa outside this house, that it was working with individual leaders. I take it those were allegations. Now, the necessary thing to do is for those who are alleging to report these cases. It's a good thing to do so that we don't just simply talk, but we help to uproot corruption. We help our country, all of us as responsible citizens. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker.
What's the position on which, what's the basis of you getting up now when your answer has been given?
No, that's precisely the point. My question was very specific, Madam Speaker, was why has government not said anything about the scandal? We've heard about all these systems that the question was very simple. Why has government not said anything about the scandal?
Point of order, Honorable House Chair, Honorable Speaker. Honorable John is not supposed to ask follow-up question on the same question if he's not satisfied. He knows what to do.
No, Honorable Steenhuisen, you won't be given a special opportunity to ask a second follow-up question. I now want to recognize the Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Deputy President, it is correct. Irregular expenditure, unauthorized expenditure, fraud, corruption, maladministration is the order of the day. Provincial governments, local governments, national governments, it appears to be there. And I think we've heard of the city of Cape Town. I don't have to elaborate on that one. You know how serious it is that they had to block the investigation. You know that. You know about Kanalan, you know about Bito, you know about Oudtshoorn, you know about all these municipalities. Now, Deputy President, we have got the mechanisms in place. The problem is this, and let me also add that we go on oversight. We uncover a whole lot of this. The problem is there is no consequences for failing to comply with the Public Finance Management Act. That is the problem. How can we change that so those people, particularly that default again and again, are brought to book and dealt with? Thank you, Deputy.
Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you very much. I think our weaknesses is that we are not really applying the legislation that is before us. As provinces, all of us were governed by the same legislation that tells us correctly in instances where there's maladministration, unauthorized expenditure, irregular expenditure, it's spelled out clearly what measures must be taken. It is upon those accounting officers in departments, in municipalities, to take the necessary steps to investigate and charge people for violation of the said legislation. So I can say we are being failed here by leadership, accounting officers. We can't be complaining about unauthorized, irregular expenditure every day when we've got people that must account. Thank you.
Honorable Posa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I am standing in on behalf of Honorable Ndabagai Sekwabaza. Honorable Deputy President, you have pointed out in your response that irregular and wasteful expenditure in provincial legislatures has declined from 14.9 billion in March 2013 to 4.7 billion in March 2018. Would you agree that there is a need to strengthen financial controls and accountability in all spheres of government in the spirit of intergovernmental fiscal relations in order to completely eliminate unauthorized, irregular, and wasteful expenditure, and that the office of the presidency as the center of power in a unitary state must play a more visible role in ensuring efficient and outcome-based spending of public resources? I thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you very much. You're correct. I think National Treasury has taken bold steps to assist provinces in terms of compliance. In case where provincial departments have gone beyond their budget, over-expended their budgets, they apply to National Treasury, and in certain cases, those applications were not condoned. That was declared over-expenditure. That means people have spent money that they don't have. Now, that strict control by National Treasury should be commended, and we are seeing now a decline of unauthorized expenditures. Now, National Treasury is also very strict on condonation of deviations from the supply chain, because you must apply if you deviate. And if that deviation is not accepted, now that is declared an irregular expenditure. Now, National Treasury is putting its foot down. That will help provinces. We need to help municipalities. I'm happy that the Department of COGTA has deployed the relevant personnel in the financial sphere, in the technical sphere, to help municipalities to manage their resources very well. Thank you.
The Honorable Matiase.
I will take it for you. Deputy President, for years you have been abusing provincial government budgets, and you yourself benefited from national government having weak oversight over provinces and from corruption. As someone who served in provincial government for so long at the highest level, what do you think are the weak points of the provincial government system are? And why is it leading to so much corruption in the provinces? Thank you very much.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Well, I will try and answer this question using my experience in the province. But I'm sure going forward, I'll be excused from that environment because I'm no longer part of the province. The biggest challenge that we face, or leaders at the provincial level are facing, is that each year year in, year out, the Auditor General will come in and audit government. And after the conclusion of the audit, the Auditor General will come and call the entire Executive Council and call everyone and say, here are your results. Here are your weaknesses. Now, these are the areas that you must attend to. Now, the biggest challenge is on the follow-up and ensure that those areas are attended so that come the next cycle of auditing, those areas have been improved. You will find in many cases that one matter stays on the qualification side year in, year out. It has been, the department has been qualified. In the previous year, it's been qualified in the current year on the same matter. That means there's been no improvement, or that matter has not been attended. So the advice that I can give to leadership is that if they can take cue to the recommendation of the Auditor General, we can get rid of all these qualifications and irregular expenditures, unauthorized expenditures. That's the advice I can give. Thank you very much.
We now come to question number 26, asked by the Honorable Bengu. Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As government, we acknowledge that we live in a society largely characterized by extremely high levels of poverty, extreme levels of violence against women, and increasing escalation of abuse of our young girls. Crime against women and children that include abduction, human trafficking, murder, rape, and other contact crime remain a reality for far too many in our country. And this scourge is a serious indictment against all of us. We are concerned that sexual assault cases have increased by 8.2% according to the recent figures published by SABC. Rape has increased by 0.5%. Sadly, this is not only about numbers, but real people whose lives have been affected by these deeds perpetrated against them. The President recently expressed that a war is being waged against women. It is a war against women's bodies, their dignity, and their right to freedom, security, and equality. Thus, all of us, especially men, have a responsibility to make every effort to ensure that such crimes do not go unreported or unpunished. We need to strengthen our resolve as a nation to commit to building families, to commit to building communities and workplaces that are cohesive, stable, safe, and peaceful. This ideal requires us to act with restraint, to act with respect, compassion in all our interactions so that we can model for our children the values that build strong character and ultimately healthy families. Our response to the violence and abuse of women and children calls for an integrated and a multifaceted approach. As a society, we need to collectively deal with social and cultural root causes that breed gender stereotypes, which continue to relegate women and girls to the bottom of the social hierarchy. No nation can succeed if it socializes its young boys to disrespect their mothers and disrespect their sisters. All sectors of society, including traditional leaders, must work together to inculcate a set of values that respects women as equal citizens who are entitled to all rights, to all freedoms and privileges, and economic opportunities which men enjoy. It is all about behavior change. We need men in society to stand up and become agents of positive change. As government, we are joining hands with the men's sector within SANAC to champion the change that focuses on building social values of respect and protection of women and children. I was privileged, Madam Speaker, to address a men's summit, an expo on the 24th of August in Durban, under the banner of Men Championing Change. These men that I've addressed acknowledge the pain and suffering visited on women and children and have committed to joining the fight to end these barbaric acts. Through the Department of Social Development, Men's Care and Men's as Champion of Change programs, we are galvanizing men to shift their attitudes, to change their behavior and become change agents in communities. The Department of Basic Education, Girls and Boys Education Movement uses school-based clubs of learners to promote positive values and behavior, human rights, dignity for all, as well as mutual respect between girls and boys. To highlight the plight of young women at our tertiary institutions, the Department of Higher Education embarked on its sexual and gender-based violence dialogue in institutions of higher learning and TVET campuses to raise awareness and deal decisively with gender-based violence faced by students and staff members. The Department of Women continues to roll out social campaigns and community dialogue to promote and raise awareness on socio-economic issues that continue to keep women subjugated to violence and impoverishment. As equal citizens, young girls must have access to quality education. For women to be free, they must access economic empowerment opportunities so that they are not perpetually dependent on men, even if it means tolerating the burden of abusive relationships. More importantly, our criminal justice system must provide the necessary protection to women and children who are subjected to violence and abuse. Young women must be empowered to make decisions that reduce their vulnerability to HIV infections and violence. Victims of violence and abuse must receive protection and the necessary psychosocial support. For victims of violence, government has established Tutuzela care centers to provide support to victims of rape and gender-based violence. These Tutuzela care centers are multidisciplinary in approach that pulls together a basket of services provided by various departments and agencies under one roof to ensure that victims are provided with a holistic support within a short space of time. These centers provide a one-stop, hospital-based package of services of survivors of sexual violence. Services provided include, among others, medical assistance, legal and psychological management support. Across all provinces, the Department of Social Development have established victim empowerment centers to support the victims of gender-based violence and sexual abuse with all the necessary psychosocial support. In addition to this, various pieces of legislation have been introduced to ensure that the rights of children are promoted and protected. This includes the Children's Act, the Child Justice Act, and the Sexual Offences Act. Early childhood development centers and policies that specifically protect children have also been introduced. In giving effect to these laws, we have opened social offences courts, which are child-friendly courts. We have increased probation officers who deal with cases of children and embarked on a campaign to distribute personal alarms to girls who walk a long distance to schools. Further to this, government is partnering with National House of Traditional Leaders, in terms of which training is provided to traditional leaders on gender-based violence and gender stereotypes. So as not to leave out the boy child, in October this year, we'll host the Boys' Assembly. That will escalate our intervention for boys to the same level as we've done for the girl child. As government, we want women's voices to be heard. We will listen and respond to the cries of women and vulnerable children. Recently, thousands of women mounted protests across the country as part of a campaign called the Total Shutdown Movement. Such courageous activism by women highlights the need for us as government to reflect on and acknowledge our shortcomings in adequately affording protection to so many women of this country. However, we are a government that is responsive, and we want to reiterate our determination to work with all South Africans to get rid of our country of this scourge. In a memorandum that women of our country handed over to the President, they called for a national gender summit at which they want to discuss matters of national importance about how South Africa can progress in advancing and protecting the rights of women. As government, we've agreed that this National Gender Summit will take place soon to forge consensus on approaches to effectively and urgently deal with the crisis of gender-based violence, discrimination against women, and gender disparities. The recommendation of the Gender Summit must be comprehensive enough to guide the work of government and the activities of all stakeholders. Government is committed to doing its part through its policies, programs, and practices that significantly reduce the levels of gender-based violence. We are prepared to decisively act against perpetrators of violence and provide the necessary support and protection to survivors of violence. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Pengu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Firstly, I would like to convey my heartfelt condolences to the friends and family of the Rhodes University student, Ms. Kenzani Masego. Honorable Deputy President, thanks for your comprehensive response. Research has shown that domestic violence against women remains widespread and underreported, and that victims of violence are effectively supported by public services, and this is among the reasons for non-reporting. Gender-based violence is more prevalent in societies where there is a culture of violence and where male superiority is treated as the norm. So, Honorable Deputy President, how are you going to ensure that there are sufficient specialized services for women and children who are victims of violence, measures that are put in place to capacitate officials handling both the victims and the perpetrators of violence, and what accountability mechanism is in place to ensure that police and court staff who fail to fulfill their legal duties are held accountable? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Well, I think as government, we've put enough instruments and interventions to ensure that all the victims of gender-based violence are taken care of and our justice system responds timelessly. Well, it's one thing to respond to a problem, but it's one thing to prevent this problem. At the root of gender-based violence is patriarchy. Men are central to this problem because most cases, the cases that have been reported yesterday, on the 11th, 762, which accounts to 67%, those are physical abuse. And this physical abuse, it's always meted against women. And it happens in closed proximity, in closed doors. It is done by people that are close to these women. It's a problem that men must confront. I think men must change. Until men recognizes women as human beings that have got feelings, that have got rights, that enjoy same freedoms as men, gender-based violence won't end. Of course, out of these 762 cases, 96 cases, these are cases where men were victims. That means there are women who are also abusing men. Of course, the number is low. But for now, I think the message must go to men because the prevalence and the majority of cases involve men. The number of children that gets raped, they are raped by men. So there's something wrong and fundamentally wrong that men must attend to. Men must change. Now, outside what government can do, I think also as a society, as a nation, all of us, all sectors of this nation must stand up against this scourge. Otherwise, this scourge can be given to government and we continue to perpetrate it ourselves within our closed doors. Now, it demands all sectors of society to stand up against the abuse of women, against the murder of women. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Mbele.
Ngiyabonga Somlom. Sekela Mongameli, we know that one of the key deterrents to violence against women and children, especially domestic abuse, is high conviction and detection rates. Because convictions send the message that abusers will not get away with it. As you said yourself just now, such abuse should not go unpunished. But in order to achieve those higher detection and conviction rates, we need more investigators in the FCS units who are better trained and equipped. So, Deputy President, in light of that imperative, would you support a drastic reallocation of budgets from VIP protection, where this ANC government spent an average of 9.1 million rand per VIP, to the detective service instead, so that ordinary citizens can benefit and we can ensure safer streets and safer homes for our women and children.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Well, I think it's correct that we must respond to this call and the shortage of police officers. The minister has reported that the number of policemen and women over a period of 5 years has gone down to 191,000, and the population has grown. So it's a matter that we must attend to. But beyond that, I think the Minister of Police highlighted in his budget speech to say they are going to create a number of units within the SABC. Units that will be dedicated to child protection, units that will be dedicated to sexual offenses cases and family violence, so that as police, we are visible, we can arrest, we can be close to this kind of cases, and we grow the necessary capacity to investigate and prosecute. Yes, I agree. As a country, I think we must stem this violence against women, no matter what it costs, because I don't see a country that can stand among countries of the world and pride itself if it undermines the rights of women and abuse children. So this is one thing that we must fight by all what we have. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Nchaisa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In light of the fact that women and children are murdered and raped almost every day, don't you think now it would be proper for the government to give a special license to women to be in possession of firearms so that they defend themselves wherever and whenever they are? Thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Well, I can see the honorable member is thinking aloud.
Order, honorable members.
I don't think so. I don't think so because, as you have heard, the Minister of Police is considering reducing the number of firearms that are out there. But you are now suggesting that we must increase these firearms. Now, all these matters, remember, they happen through a firearm. We are looking forward to a gun-free society. We are looking forward to that society, and we must work hard to reach that point. I don't think if we come across challenges, we think of buying a gun. We must deal with the challenge. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Kubisa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sekela Mongameli, you have alluded to the fact that there should be a way of protecting our girls when they go to school. Just recently in Durban, a girl was taken towards her home, but thrown out next to the vicinity of the home, and her body was found decomposed in the bush. And it's a phenomenon that is rising, whereby children are driven, especially girls, dropped within the proximity of their homes, and then they are found dead and decomposed. And besides that, just around here in Cape Town, it is alleged that women are thrown out of the trains and they are robbed, and it's a widespread phenomenon, it's a scourge. What is it that can be done? And of course, taking into cognizance the rising crime statistics. Thank you.
Well, when it comes to young girls that are supposed to go to school every day, to and fro from school. It's very important that these young children must be accompanied by an adult. If there is no transport that takes them to school, they must be accompanied by an adult. Just to ensure that these children go to school safe and come back home safe. But we also want to encourage parents to utilize the nearby schools. Because as parents, we've got choices. We choose a school that's far from home, and the movement of the child to and from school becomes a problem, while there's a school next door. Well, we've got scholar transport that seeks to assist children, but of course, if children are young, they must always be under the watch of an adult. Well, the incidences that we are citing that are happening in our trains and all that, this is the phenomenon that we're talking about, that as South Africans, as men, we must confront ourselves, because these things are happening in the hands of men that don't respect a woman. When they see a woman, they see an object. They see something that can be killed. They see something that can be raped. It's a wrong thing. We must confront ourselves. I don't think, even if we have got the money in the world, we can't have a policeman or a policewoman for each and every woman, for each and every girl child. As a society, we must take the responsibility to behave and live like human beings. Thank you very much.
We now come to question number 27, asked by the Honorable Tlowama. The Honorable the Deputy President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is true that there are notable challenges around the country as far as performance in the delivery of infrastructure project is concerned. The challenges include limited capacity for infrastructure planning at institutional level, slow approvals of projects, inadequate contract management and execution capacity, and slow or non-payment of contractors on time. Because of these challenges, the timely delivery of projects is impacted negatively, leading to delays in the rollout of infrastructure to meet required basic services to people. The findings of the Auditor General, as reflected in the media release of the 23rd May 2018, with specific reference to Mpumalanga, on page 15, reads as follows. Mpumalanga saw an improvement in the overall 2016-17 audit outcomes, a continuation of a trend of slow but steady improvement over the past few years. While this is commendable, the AG notes a lot of work still needs to be done to ensure that improvements are sustainable, to curb irregular expenditure, which stands at 10% of the provincial local government expenditure budget, and address delays in infrastructure and basic services, close quote. Overall, the report of the Auditor General touches on very important aspects that are at the heart of infrastructure development and basic service delivery, namely leadership, financial and performance management, and governance. Not only do we agree with this opinion, but also support the recommendations of the Auditor General in this report when he remarks, I open quote, many of the municipal problems we have flagged can be turned around through strong, ethical, and courageous leadership in the administration of municipal council. We believe leadership in administrative and oversight structures, such as the national and provincial treasuries, national and provincial departments that deal with local government, municipal councils, and municipal public accounts committees have a key role to play in changing the current local government audit outcomes picture for the better. Close quote. To improve this situation, you will know that there is a Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Council that seeks to ensure integration and coordination of implementation of all infrastructure-related projects. This also enables government to ensure proper alignment between national, provincial, and local structures, including alignment of investment plan with funding allocations. In practically addressing these challenges and making necessary improvements, we receive and scrutinize quarterly reports in Cabinet on the state of service delivery. In this instance, government has, through the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, identified a number of interventions to support municipalities in executing their legislative mandates. Among the key support measures, COGTA is working closely with all provinces and municipalities to focus on providing direct support to strengthen the capacity for infrastructure planning and delivery. The deployment of technical support in municipal management, engineering, and financial management. Strengthening the effectiveness of intergovernmental structures in coordinating various local government interventions for better impact in terms of service delivery. One of the areas of improvement that needs strengthening is to have a standardized and automated reporting mechanism to track project progress and performance. This should be complemented by the development of an early warning system to address any bottlenecks that may be identified. We know, for example, that as part of the measures to achieve quick turnaround times in the delivery of infrastructure projects, standardized designs for schools, for early childhood development centers, libraries, and clinics could be one of the way to go. The outcome is that less time is spent on the designs if, as government, we agree on a standardized design, which accelerates the implementation. This also cuts the unnecessary expenses that we pay year in, year out for professional fees. Despite these challenges, we are encouraged by progress that we've made in the delivery of strategic and basic social infrastructure as government. Since the development of the National Infrastructure Plan, government has made significant progress in terms of delivery of social infrastructure. We have been able to guide the development of operational plans and strategies to ensure integration of infrastructure plans over a longer period. Honorable Speaker, our honorable members can be rest assured that our infrastructure delivery program has contributed a lot in transforming a number of previously underserviced areas in order to raise the levels of development and ensure that equity and inclusive growth is achieved. Our focus on rural development is also contributing to job creation, local economic development, and investment. To this end, construction has been the second largest generator of new jobs in this administration. Although it struggled during 2017, where 85,000 new jobs have been created, in the first 6 months of 2018. 111,000 jobs have been created since the beginning of 2018. Construction has had the highest job creation rate of all 10 industries reported in the quarter labor force survey. The jobs tracked by the PICC through the strategic integrated projects has shown similar increase since the quarter ending in September 2017. In light of the responsibilities assigned to me by the President to promote social cohesion initiatives and lead government's anti-poverty programs together with my cabinet colleagues, our premiers and mayors, we will continue to provide support to existing initiatives that will strengthen various instruments of service delivery. In execution of their function, ministers have undertaken outreach visits in the provinces and municipalities to assess the delivery of services. As Deputy President, I'm part of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee, which is seized with finding solutions and better ways of accelerating infrastructure development.
Honorable
Thank you very
Speaker,
much.
point of order.
Honorable Tlowama, it's strange that you would interrupt the answering of your own question.
No, is the Deputy President answering me, or is it the State of the Nation address?
No, Honorable Tlowama, allow the Deputy President to finish.
I'm done.
Please proceed.
I'm done, Honorable Speaker.
Okay, the Honorable Deputy President is finished, and now I call on Honorable Tlowama to ask a follow-up question, should he wish to do so.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Deputy President, I took an effort to prepare your letter of resignation as a Deputy President. But you must first agree with me that you did to Mpumalanga what Supra Maumapelo did to Northwest. Can you also agree with me that you became a Deputy President by holding our President hostage and the ANC? Can you agree with me that you are not a fit and proper person to occupy that office? I thank you.
Point of order, Chairperson.
The point of order.
The member is casting aspersions. Rule 85.
Honorable Tlowama, you know what to do when you have issues of the nature of which you have alluded to. You know what to do, and that is to prepare a properly prepared motion with the details that would be required in order for this House to deal with the issues that you would be wanting to raise. And therefore, I assume you've done your part of doing a follow-up, and I proceed to Honorable Steenhuisen.
Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Tlowama, your point. Your point was raised wrongly.
No, how? What?
Honorable Tlowama,
Yes.
you've raised your issues wrongly, and I'm saying to you, go and prepare a properly constructed motion.
Honorable Speaker, I want you to educate me. Tell me, where did I raise this issue wrong?
Honorable Tlowama,
Yes.
if you stand up in the House and you accuse an honorable member of this House, we have to stop you because you know what to do.
I did not.
If you have information you want to bring to the
Honorable
attention
Speaker,
of the House.
I did not accuse
I am
him.
not going to
said-
argue with you.
I said-
Honorable Tlowama,
I said
take
to
your
him,
seat.
can he agree with
Honorable
me?
Tlowama, take your seat. The Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Deputy President, as a former Premier yourself, you'll be aware that one of the mechanisms to combat poverty is the schools feeding schemes where hungry children get a meal. In 2014, the Mpumalanga High Court set aside a 100 million rand a year tender for the province's school feeding schemes. It found that all 9 companies, including 3 companies owned by Ms. Ethel Shongwe, who was a provincial government official in the administration and a member of the Tender Adjudication Committee, had inflated their prices. It was further found that 4 companies charged 400% the maximum allowable price and had still been awarded the tender. And all were linked to African Pearl Trading, 15, a company whose registered directors included an MEC in your cabinet, and Mr. Mduduzi Manana, who was an ANC Member of Parliament. Were you aware of this? And if so, what lessons have you learnt that you will carry into your new role as leader of government business?
The Honourable Deputy President.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Just a point of order. Just a point of order, Madam Speaker.
Honourable.
Madam Speaker, you will know that a follow-up question must arise directly from the original question, or at least from the answer provided by the Deputy President. Now, the Deputy President, in his answer, he did not talk about issues that are raised by Honourable Steenhuisen. Secondly, that question does not arise directly from the original question. Thanks.
That point
Speaker.
of order is sustained.
Speaker, point of order.
Madam Speaker.
Speaker.
Honourable,
Madam Speaker.
the Honourable Member, let me attend to the Honourable Member of the EFF.
Speaker.
What is the point on which you are rising?
The Deputy President has got an option to respond to the question.
I
He's
know the
fully
chair knows
capable,
that.
So it does not
take
need
your
him for
seat, Honourable
assistance. The
Member,
Deputy
take
President
your
must
seat.
just, because the
Take
matter is in
your
the interest
seat.
of the House.
That point is a serious point. However, I will give the opportunity to the Deputy President should he wish to deal with the question. But it doesn't arise from the actual original question or what the Deputy President has said. However, Deputy President, please go ahead and deal with the issue the best
Thank you.
way you deal with.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I agree with you. The question does not arise from the original question. However, I want to help the Honourable Member that I'm no longer a Premier of Mpumalanga. And that province, Mpumalanga, is still having a government as a Premier. All other matters that relates to that government, there's an authority now that must answer to everything that happens in that government. And correctly speaking, I must recuse myself from that office.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Sengwa.
Madam Speaker.
What is the point, Honourable Steenhuisen?
Madam Speaker, the point of order is simply this, that the question I asked arises directly from both the written original question, where it asks specifically that, as Deputy President, what will you do now to promote social cohesion initiatives and leave the government's anti-poverty programs? He also spoke about the audit processes that his department had gone under. This was not about Mpumalanga now. It was about Mpumalanga in 2014 when he was the Premier, when these tenders were awarded. The simple question was, what did he learn from it and what will he carry now into government? That is completely germane to the original question. And the Honourable Deputy President has not answered him.
Point of order,
It's no good,
Honourable Speaker.
it's no good us coming here
Point
and
of
wasting
order,
time if the
Honourable Speaker.
Deputy President's not going to answer the questions.
Honourable Steenhuisen, you have had your chance. Honourable Lisoma.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable John knows very well he's abusing the opportunity. The Deputy President has responded. Whether he likes it or not, there has been a response that has been given.
I have recognized the Honourable Sengwa.
Ngiyathokoza mhlonishwa somlomo ithuko nginika lona. Honorable Deputy President, once our audit outcomes actually are presented, and earlier on in another question, but I think linked to this one, you made reference to scope and so on, is the fact that there's an absence of consequences. But on top of that is even the institutions of state which have been given the duty and responsibility to prosecute and deal with these matters are not doing so. A point in case is the NPA. 686 serious cases have still not been processed up to now. And so whether the AG does his job or does not do his job, the bottleneck is in the system insofar as prosecution is concerned. So what is it that you believe needs to be done in order for us to complete the full cycle of the audit so that it's from audit to outcomes to prosecution? How do we actually take the NPA out of the mess that it's in so that it is able to fulfill its duties and functions and give credence to the work that the AG has done or any other institution of state, including but not limited to whistleblowers? Thank you.
On a point of order, Honorable Speaker.
The Deputy Chief Whip.
The Honorable Sengwa is asking a new question at all. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, with all due respect to the Deputy Chief Whip, the question arises out of the findings of the Auditor General. And I'm saying,
Honorable
once we receive
Sengwa,
those-
awungiyeke ngichair.
Oh, ngiyaxolisa somlomo, umqondisi.
Honorable Deputy President, do you want to handle the issue that Honorable Sengwa has raised?
Yes, Honorable Speaker.
Please proceed, Honorable DP.
Thank you. Well, it's correct. It's a new question, but I want to answer this question. I want to answer the question. I've said in the previous questions that if all of us as leaders in the different spheres of government, we were to follow the Auditor General's findings and recommendations, follow them to the latter, we won't be talking about these findings today. What it's missing here, it's a follow-up on issues that have been raised by the Auditor General. Now that National Treasury is trying to intervene in the space, I think we are going to insist that provinces, municipalities must respond to the issues raised by the Auditor General. Some issues are clear to say this is irregular, it must be investigated, this is unauthorized, and a suggestion is made on how to deal with these issues. But I've said again that it is not only the responsibility of National Treasury to insist on provinces to respond to Auditor General's recommendation. It is also about the different legislatures that are holding the executive to account, because these financial matters are brought to the legislature and they are discussed. And certain recommendations are being made again by legislatures. In the case of municipalities, the council discusses these Auditor General's recommendations and outcomes, and they make recommendations. Therefore, it is not one person who can resolve this problem. These three spheres of government, you will understand they are autonomous. You can only intervene through a certain section of the Constitution. But in the spirit of cooperative governance, you work close with them, you advise them, this matter, handle it in this way. In the case of audit findings, we'll work with provinces, we'll work with municipalities to ensure that they respond to Auditor General's findings. That is what I said, and I'm repeating it. Thank you.
The Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Deputy President, once again, I think you've highlighted all the mechanisms that we have in place, and we all know about it. The Auditor General often makes his findings, makes remedial action, but time and time again, Honorable Deputy President, Nothing happens. Now let me give you a good example. There is a duplication of oversight in the country. You have internal audit, you've got monitoring and evaluation, you've got portfolio committees at every level. And very often, even this national members of parliament go and do the work of the members from the provincial legislature because they're not doing their work. Now, surely they have a responsibility to monitor and evaluate and make sure that plans are implemented and people perform and serve and deliver. They don't. And we go, their time is very often, and we have to go with them, and they sit back and they watch us, and we are doing the interrogating and doing the work for them. So what is the purpose of a second sphere of government if it's not serving the intended purpose? Maybe we should do away with it and let them have two spheres of government.
Your time has expired for raising
Deputy
your
President,
question.
we have the mechanisms. It's not working. There's no consequences. They are not implementing. Same people. What are we going to do?
Imam, your time has expired for statements. You've been making statements. I guess I would like to take a fourth supplementary question. And it will be Honorable Ntlangwini.
I pressed. Deputy President, while you were the Premier of Mpumalanga, the Provincial Department of Education failed to deliver basic services, with funds always
Honorable
going
members.
missing. The National Department of Basic Education is also in a mess. In 2013, the Department of Basic Education set itself a deadline in the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure that by the end of November 2016, all schools would have access to water, electricity, and proper sanitation.
Your time is almost up and you haven't asked a question.
Not.
Do you have a question, Honorable Member? Please ask it. Please ask it. Fast forward to the question.
Deputy President, if you were unable to hold your provincial government accountable for not delivering services and corruption, how are you going to hold the National Department of Basic Education accountable and make sure that they meet the deadlines they set for themselves with the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure?
Honorable Deputy President.
Well, thanks, Honorable Speaker. I would insist on what I've said, that the new Premier in Mpumalanga can best answer some of these questions. And I'm here now. I would answer to the questions that you present to me on the basis of the work that I'm doing now. I can't answer for the Premier in Mpumalanga. Thank you.
Honorable members, let's proceed to question number 20. What is the point of order, Honorable Member?
Speaker, the question was just making a reference to his former position.
We all
the
heard
question,
it.
No, the question was asking, he failed to do it then. Will he do it now? Will he hold these departments accountable now? It wasn't asking what he did in Mpumalanga.
I think, Honorable Member, I heard him saying, ask him questions about his responsibilities now, and he's prepared to answer that.
We asked exactly that. Will he do it now?
May I pass to question number 28 asked by the Honorable Killian and call upon the Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me state at the outset that the root causes of poverty and inequality have to do with the unfair and unequal distribution of economic opportunities engendered by the history of land dispossession, lack of access to quality education and healthcare, as well as years of underdevelopment in the former homelands and townships. Apartheid stripped people of their dignity, stripped people of their land, livelihood, and overall means of production. It distorted the supply and demand patterns of the economy along racial lines. It undermined the asset base of individuals, households, and communities through poor healthcare system, overcrowding, environmental degradation, and mismatch of resources and opportunities, race and gender discrimination, and social isolation. These triggers have shaped the nature of South Africa's economy and society, and they represent apartheid's legacy of inequality and poverty. Importantly, they have the potential to ensure the persistence of poverty, even though many other aspects of the South African political economy are being transformed. Apartheid's spatial planning was a chief enabler of a system that was essentially designed to keep the black majority landless, unskilled, malnourished. Township and Bantu stands under the apartheid spatial planning framework were designed simple to be pools of labor to service the main industrial and commercial areas without prospects for active participation in the mainstream economy. Because of the combination of all this, we had to come with intervention that will reverse the adverse impact of this painful past on our people. Inspired by the Freedom Charter, the Constitution, as well as our National Development Plan, the narrowing of inequality, breaking down the barriers that hamper participation in the economy, and reducing poverty have been consistent themes of our democratic government since 1994. Our multifaceted approach to addressing the challenges of poverty, inequality, includes a number of instruments. We continue to prioritize our budget so that it is pro-poor. To this end, we opened access to education for all. We rolled out early childhood education to promote holistic development that instills the culture of lifelong learning. We introduced no-fee schools for the poor. We implemented adult basic education to raise levels of literacy amongst our adult population. We implemented school nutrition program to ensure that no child goes to school hungry. We have introduced free higher education for students from poor households. South Africa is one of the largest social assistance programs in the world, covering more than 17 million beneficiaries. Similarly, government has put in place programs that aims at improving access of the poor to other social services through the provisioning of improved sanitation, housing, electricity, water, and access to healthcare services. We are making progress in expanding the quality of healthcare, including the implementation of the National Health Insurance. In previously underdeveloped and underserviced areas, we have built transport infrastructure network to connect communities and provide economic mobility. In the longer term, the sustainability of our efforts against poverty and inequality will depend on an economy that grows at a sustainable level to create efficient employment for the majority of our people. Employment enables people to earn an income to support themselves and their families. These services improve other aspects of life for the majority of our citizens. In an effort of empowering recipients of social assistance and ensuring economic development in areas where these recipients reside, the Department of Social Development provides market opportunities to a number of cooperatives through purchasing of food and school uniforms produced by cooperatives. The upcoming Job Summit will ensure that we continue on the path of addressing our country's poverty and income distribution. The summit will elevate the efforts focused on inclusive growth and correcting the issues of wage differentiation. Further to this summit and the investment conference will continue to embark on a drive to attract more and more investment into our economy. As already noted, the redistribution of assets has been an important component of our country's approach to addressing poverty and inequality. Key among them is the land reform, which is at the heart of addressing inequality, poverty, and the restoration of dignity of our people. Government realizes that the National Minimum Wage Bill is one of the greatest contributors to poverty alleviation and reduction of income inequality. We have also introduced various government incentives to support entrepreneurship under the Department of Small Business Development. We have also made interventions like the expanded public works program, which provide income relief, skills development, and opportunities to get long-term gainful employment and creation of own enterprises. In the first years of EPWP, a target of 1 million work opportunities was set in the infrastructure, environment, social, and economic sectors. This target was exceeded with a total of 1.6 million job opportunities being created by 2009. Further upscaling EPWP has resulted in more than 3 million work opportunities being created between 2009 and 2013. We are currently tracking on achieving our target for the third phase of EPWP. Honorable Speaker, there is no doubt that sustainable path to addressing the challenge of poverty and inequality lies at the heart of our industrialization effort to enhance greater levels of participation by those who are historically disadvantaged and marginalized in our country. In this regard, we have made significant progress in directing strategic investment towards targeted areas in order to support economic growth and job creation. The Special Economic Zone program was specifically developed to promote the creation of regionally diversified industrial economy by establishing new industrial hubs in underdeveloped regions of this country. The total number of designated special economic zones has to date increased up to 9. The majority were designated as IDZs and are presently in the process of transitioning their institutional governance and ownership structure in compliance with the requirement of an SCZ Act. The designated SCZs continue to show positive progress in terms of the number of investors operating in these zones. More importantly, there has also been a significant increase in the number and value of secured investment in those special economic zones. The number of operational investors in designated SEZ has increased from 72 to 80, with an investment value of over 10 billion. The number of secured or signed investors is 86, with a total investment value of 52.2 billion. These SEZs include the Richards Bay ITZ, Saldanha Bay ITZ, the Dube Trade Port SEZ, the Kuha ITZ, the East London ITZ, the Gauteng ITZ, Maluti Apafong SEZ, Atlantis SEZ, Musina Makado SEZ. Some of these ITZs, SEZ, such as Musina Makado, Saldanha Bay, Maluta Pafong, these are found in the previously marginalized areas. Work is underway between the Department of Trade and Industry and the provinces on the planning and implementation of SEZs in the following previously marginalized communities: Nkomazi, Bojanala, Uppington, and Tubati. Additionally, in order to bring about full-scale industrialization and inclusive growth, government initiated a structured program for the revitalization of industrial parks that are located in the old industrial areas across our country. This program has identified 11 state-owned industrial parks to be revitalized, and this is implemented through national government in partnership with provinces, their agencies, and municipalities. I am advised by the Department of Trade and Industry that to date, a total of 65,854 jobs have been created within these state-owned industrial parks across the country. These cover townships and underdeveloped areas such as Buchabelo, Sishihu, Karankua, Koankoa, to name a few. In the last 2 years alone, government has invested approximately 511 million in revitalizing the basic infrastructure of 10 industrial parks across South Africa, addressing key challenges of industrial development infrastructure such as electricity, bulk water supply, and sewer system. This has assisted in arresting the decline in the industrial park infrastructure so as to encourage further and further investment. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Killian.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the Deputy President for elaborating on government's anti-poverty interventions and for explaining the root causes of the poverty and inequality that we still face in the country. My follow-up question relates to the issue of quality education. As former President Barack Obama said, the best anti-poverty program is a world-class education. Now, what we know is that we have expanded and provided access to education, especially also to early childhood development. However, we also, despite investment in the basic education system, we have a huge dropout rate, and the quality of some of the language and maths and science subject teaching is really questionable. In addition to that, Honorable Deputy President, we also seem to have a skills mismatch. Now, my question is, how will government improve the quality of our basic education system, particularly math, science, and language teaching outcomes? And secondly, how will government enhance the human resource development strategy to ensure that our economic and industrial development policies are actually firmly linked to a skills planning strategy so that the two can overcome the skills mismatch, which is currently causing qualified young people to be unemployable. We need to address that urgently, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and I would like to make out a case for a master plan for
time has expired, Honourable
economic and social policies to be linked. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, as a country, I think we've done enough, and we are still in the process of improving the quality of education. You will be aware, Honourable Member, that this government has continued to put new infrastructure, right from early childhood, primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. This amount of infrastructure that we have put in place, it's a clear indication about the seriousness that we put on education, on skills. Of course, there are still areas where in our schools there is no sanitation. It's a challenge that I think we are equal to it as a country. The Minister of Basic Education currently invited business people to assist in the provision of sanitation to our schools. I'm trying to say we've invested a lot of money since the inception of this democracy in schools infrastructure. Well, quality, as you'll have noticed, it's improving day by day, year by year. The number of learners that are taking maths and science, this number is growing every year. We're investing a lot in infrastructure that supports maths and science in all provinces. So we are quite satisfied as a country that we're on the right track. When it comes to our tertiary education, we've done a lot as a country in terms of skilling the nation. We've got universities, we've got TVET colleges that continue to train and skill our young people. Now, we've invested more of our resources through the cities in training young people. I'm not convinced that there's a skills mismatch. I am not convinced. Of course, as a country, we must, from time to time, as we train, as we skill our people, we must be guided by the supply and demand. But where I'm standing now, I'm not convinced that there's a skills mismatch in our country. All that I can confirm is that we still need to train more and more people, especially those who have dropped out of our schools. I agree that year in, year out, young people drop out of schools, and those are a challenge to government to find ways and means to train them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Lees.
Deputy President, I will be taking the Honourable Lisa's question. He's just withdrawn from the House. He is ill. Deputy President, the question is as follows. There are 9.6 million people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs. That, in the end, is the root cause of inequality. And most economists agree that that, in part, is caused by reckless policy proposals like the nationalization of the central bank and, indeed, the formation of state banks. What are you going to do to modify or withdraw those reckless policies so that we can get economic growth up and inequality down in South Africa?
Deputy President.
Well, if I may ask, which are those reckless policies you're talking about?
Deputy President, I'd be happy to remind you. Land expropriation without compensation. The nationalization of the Reserve Bank. The formation of the state bank. And I could go on and on and on and on.
Honourable Deputy President.
Deputy Speaker.
Please do not invite their additional questions. Their questions are limited. Thank you.
On a point of order, Honourable.
What's the point of order? Yes.
Honourable Deputy
Order.
Speaker.
Honourable members, we want to hear you. Let her speak and then I'll hear you.
The Honourable Mainier's question has absolutely nothing to do with the reply nor the original question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. It's not a... Go ahead, Honourable Deputy President.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Well, the policies that continues to shape our country, remember, are informed by our past. They are informed by our past. These policies seek to redress the past imbalances. I don't see us as a country proceeding going forward and leave those imbalances with us. You must acknowledge the fact that there are people who are aggrieved that land has been dispossessed from them. And somewhere down the line as a country, we must acknowledge this and try and redress that problem if we are serious about our development. So I'm not really seeing these policies as irrelevant to growth. As long as South Africans, black and white, we committed to work together and share the country's wealth, I think we can make South Africa work. As long as you still see yourself as white, I see myself as black, we are not going to make it. We must work together in one economy that seeks to make our country better for all of us. There comes a time as a country where we must accept that the challenges that we are facing, all of us, are challenges of our own country, all of us. So the policies that we have in front of us as government, you would agree with me that they seek to address a problem of our past. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Carter.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I must say, no skills mismatch. That's quite a shocker. We've done enough. I'm serious, this must be a joke. Ultimately, Deputy President, the solution to resolving poverty and inequality lies in inclusive growth. And in order to achieve inclusive growth, we need economic growth in the first instance. Now, Deputy President, a leading business person has recently stated that we will reach, and I quote, a point of no return, close quote, if government continues to enact damaging populist policies that are destroying hope of restoring investor confidence, as is evident by years of stagnation and recession. Now, Deputy President, 24 years later, you are still blaming apartheid. But does government agree that we face a crisis of a lack of economic growth and that bad and irrational governance lies at the core of this stagnation? If not, what factors informs this crisis? Thank you.
Deputy President.
Well, firstly, we've got a challenge of an economy that is not growing. It's a challenge, and there are certain sectors of this economy that remains a backbone of our overall economy. Our economy rests mainly on mining sector, agriculture, manufacturing. Now, there are certain sectors that we must protect as a country if really want to drive economic growth. But it is not always correct that economic growth necessarily will translate into creating jobs. It depends how we grow this economy. Whether we go the labor-intensive way, yes, in that way it will translate into job creation. Now, as a country, we have noticed the current decline. I don't probably agree that to those who are saying we're in a technical recession. I don't. Because we have not taken a very comprehensive picture. We're taking a quarter by quarter statistics. We have not taken the overall statistics over a period. Well, but I'm confident that as government, we're going to reverse this tide. We're going to reverse this tide, and I'm sure the president will make a few announcements on how government wants to intervene in this current situation. Well, to say when it's going to happen, because we feel as government it is our responsibility to respond to this situation. But I want to dismiss the fact that land expropriation accounts for this situation or is scaring investors. I don't agree. And we said again and again that land expropriation will happen in a very responsible way. The fact of the matter is that those who have got the land in their hands must accept that they must release the land. And in that way, it will happen in a very amicable way. We are not intending to disrupt our agricultural production. And standing here, I think I've made strides to talk to the leaders in the sector. You might have noticed that I've spoken to all the unions, and we're in an agreement that we can handle this challenge before us, and we can pass. So, I don't think we should be pessimists, run away from a fact that we must address. Land expropriation, it will happen in a very responsible way. And this one will come and it will pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Kubisa.
Sekela Somlomo siyabonga. Honorable Deputy President, a study conducted by the Planning and Monitoring Evaluation, State South Africa and the World Bank which is entitled to Overcoming Poverty and Inequality in South Africa, an assessment of drivers, constraints and opportunities, stated that poverty levels are consistently highest among female-headed households, Black South Africans and children below the age of 15, and these groups tend to have a higher risk of falling into poverty. Members of female-headed households are up to 10% more likely to slip into poverty and 2% less likely to escape poverty than members of the male-headed households. And race remains a strong predictor of poverty in South Africa, with Black South Africans being at the highest risk of being poor. Now, Honorable Deputy President, do you think that the government has done enough by way of enabling legislation within the supply chain management to allow the SMEs, for women in particular, to procure some jobs? Thank you very much.
I don't think as government we have done enough. We still need to do more and more. And I'm encouraged by the fact that we are almost, the Department of Small Business is now gaining its feet. And it's one department that I think we must keep and ensure that we insist on creating SMMEs. And as government, we must be deliberate in our effort of creating a market for all these SMMEs so that they can, we can procure services, goods and services from these SMMEs. We're still hoping that our SMME drive support is going to bear fruit. Remember, any economy that is not supported by an SMME base, that economy cannot survive. So it's important that we create that base, SMMEs, cooperatives, supported by government mainly, and presenting ourselves as government as a market for all the services that these cooperative and SMMEs can render. Thank you.
We move to question 29, asked by Honorable McPherson to the Deputy President. Deputy President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. National Treasury suspended the release of the Employment Creation Fund and the Department of the National Treasury suspended the release of the Employment Creation Fund, donor fund, to the Department of Trade and Industry in order to initiate an independent performance audit of the program. This suspension was due to concerns that were raised relating to the governance and compliance with financial and legal prescriptions on the use of official development assistance. The audit that has been conducted has identified a number of challenges in the Employment Creation Fund, which mostly relate to compliance, accountability, and good governance. Based on these findings, National Treasury and the Department of Trade and Industry agreed that the findings and the recommendation of the audit needed to be addressed before releasing further funding to DTI. With regards to an Employment Creation Fund, I've been advised by both Ministers of Finance and Ministers of Trade and Industry that their departments are working together to reopen the fund as a matter of urgency. An action plan followed all Employment Creation Fund audits has been agreed by both departments. I'm further advise that this matter has been referred to the Portfolio Committee, and I will suggest that it be addressed at that forum. I therefore believe that there is no need for the Deputy President to intervene in the Employment Creation Fund program at this stage, as an agreement on a joint way forward between the two departments has been reached. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable McPherson.
Deputy President, the Employment Creation Fund was funded by the EU through a 100 million euro grant. To date, 500 million of that 1.2 billion rand has not been distributed to the 31 beneficiaries to create job opportunities in the private and NGO sector. For 2 years, they have waited for these funds. Just last month, the ANC, your political party, in the Portfolio Committee of Trade and Industry, point blank refused to discuss this matter. And now they've apparently told you that they will. So they've lied to you. Now, while they've refused to do that, beneficiaries have gone bankrupt and others are about to go under because of your government's inability to solve a civil war between National Treasury and the DTI. Your ANC has presided over unemployment reaching 10 million South Africans and an economic self-inflicted recession. The reason lies in the chaos I have just described. As the leader of government business, why are you unable to sort out the specific mess and keep relying on lies being told to you by your cabinet colleagues and members of your caucus?
Deputy President.
Well, like I've said, from the two ministers, the matter has been resolved, and I'm sure money will now be dispersed, and I'm going to make it my business to ensure to it that this money gets dispersed to those who are supposed to receive the money. I accept what the ministers are telling me, because there's nothing contrary that tells me something else, and I must believe their words, and I'm sure it's going to happen. The money is going to be dispersed, and it is your duty as the Portfolio Committee to discuss it. But all the glitches, I must inform the House that all the glitches that were there, the governance failures, all the compliances that were supposed to be adhered to, I've been assured that all that has been dealt with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Esterhuizen.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. All right, Deputy President, you actually answered my original question, but let me ask you, the first initiative of this fund is a joint private and public sector fund for small business support. Small business is seen as the catalyst and incubator to grow jobs and eradicate poverty and equality. So how can you stand on that podium, Mr. Deputy President, and wax lyrical about consequent management? The Minister of Small Business complained about a lack of funds for small business enterprises. Where's consequent management when the same minister spent 700,000 rand on a single overseas trip, when she should be the first person to use a budget responsible and promote small business development? How can you explain this, Mr. Deputy President? Where's consequent management in this particular instance? Thank you.
Deputy President.
Well, Honourable Member, I don't think we disagree on the use of the fund. The fund, it's meant to support enterprise development. It's meant to support small businesses. We don't disagree. But if wrongdoing has been detected in the manner the money is dispersed, surely someone must take responsibility and say, yay, let me investigate and audit this. And now that And now that this has been investigated, governance structures have been improved, then they can release the money so that this thing must not occur again. So we don't disagree on how the money must be used, but we disagree if there's wrongdoing. I'm quite surprised that when it comes to this particular fund, you don't care whether there's wrongdoing or no wrongdoing. You just want the money. What is the interest you have in this thing? If there's wrongdoing, let's deal with the wrongdoing, and then after that, we disperse the money. You should be applauding the Minister of Finance to say, no, 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 let's attend to the wrongdoings in the disbursement of the money. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Williams.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy President, considering that we have a high level of unemployment and poverty in South Africa, and that government alone cannot be the only ones addressing this challenge, are there any partnerships with the private sector to assist government's anti-poverty program? Thank you.
Deputy President.
Well, like I've said in the previous question, that as government, we are proceeding with our industrialization program. And in that instance, we have created all these special economic zones where we've opened up for business, for private sector to invest. And we are happy to say these special economic zones are proving to be a success. There is an investment. More and more people are getting employed. So government has invested money to create those zones, and business is investing. So it seems like this partnership is working. Our people are getting employment, and SMMEs are starting to produce whatever they can produce. So it's working. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Ntlangwini.
I will speak, Deputy Speaker.
Okay. Maiden question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Deputy President, in a letter written to beneficiaries by Employment Creation Fund Manager Paseka Masemola, she says of the Treasury, conspiracy theories would be forgiven in concluding the standoff with Treasury was a
The
deliberate...
honorable members, you are not allowed to do that. Order. Go ahead, honorable member.
She says of the Treasury, conspiracy theories would be forgiven to conclude that the standoff with Treasury was a deliberate and organized attempt to undermine African leadership, and refers to powerful civil servants hell-bent on blocking efforts to lift black people out of poverty. This resonates with our earlier view that Treasury may have been captured by people who are hell-bent on undermining African leadership. What is your view about the pervasive idea that there are people in National Treasury who do all in their power to undermine African leadership?
Honorable Deputy President.
Stop drowning. Well, I don't believe in that assertion. I think people in National Treasury, they're trying their best. I mean, it's very difficult if you are in National Treasury. Everyone wants money irregardless the processes. So I think officials there are doing very well. They stick to the law. They stick to the law. So I'm not really in support of that assertion. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to question 30, asked by Honorable Masango to the Deputy President. Deputy President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In August 2018, South Sudan parties, including the South Sudan People's Liberation Movement, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, all of them participated at the peace talks facilitated by the High-Level Revitalization Forum of the Agreement of Resolution of Conflict in South Sudan, led by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. On the 5th of August 2018, the parties have appended their signatures to the agreement on the outstanding issues of governance. This has been hailed as a momentous achievement in the efforts to finding lasting peace in South Sudan. Upon the signing on the 27th of June 2018, signing the declaration of agreement between the parties of the conflict of South Sudan, and the signing on the 5th of August 2018 of the agreement on outstanding issues of governance, our government issued a statement congratulating all the parties to the agreement and urged them to ensure that all signed agreements are complied with and fully implemented to ensure sustainable peace, security and stability, and the development of South Sudan. In the same statement, we commended the leadership of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development for their tireless efforts to facilitating peace and security in South Sudan. Also, at the level of the African Union, our President, in his capacity as the chair of the high-level ad hoc committee of heads of state and government on South Sudan, continues to support the peace process as led by IGAD. In this regard, the President convened a meeting of a high-level ad hoc committee of heads of state and government on the fringes of the June 2018 AU Summit to assess the peace and security development in South Sudan. In addition, the President appointed me as Deputy President to be his special envoy to South Sudan, essentially to assist the people of South Sudan to unite and reconcile in order to lead the reconstruction program of South Sudan. Honorable members will be aware that, be that as it may, this appointment coincides with a process that has been led by IGAD that had brought together all the stakeholders in South Sudan to negotiate the latest agreement aimed at establishing a transitional government and finally ending the conflict in South Sudan. I therefore took a conscious decision to delay my engagement on this matter to give the IGAD-led peace process time. I'm nonetheless planning to visit South Sudan soon to meet with the key stakeholders and consult with neighboring countries. It is important to emphasize that our mandate is to complement and support all the initiatives that have been done by IGAD. Thank you very much.
Honorable Masango.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy President. It is pleasing to note that there's been a cessation of hostilities pursuant to the signing of the agreement, the peace agreement. I think the worry now should be the external actors. And I want to ask the Deputy President whether, as a special envoy, he would consider influencing and advising the IGAD to also look at external players, especially companies that have got interest in the oil fields of South Sudan. Thank you.
Deputy President.
Well, thank you, Honourable Member. I'm not going to speculate about the interference of external forces. I want to accept the bona fides of all the parties, their genuineness, and probably as South Africa, we are going to support all those initiatives and be part of the process to ensure that they go smooth in this transition period. This peace process can break at any time if not well supported. because you'll realize we've got too many deputy presidents there, which is something very fragile. Thank you very much.
Honorable Hlengwa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Deputy President, whilst all of us welcome the developments that have taken place because they are a step in the right direction, one would want to find out what is South Africa's financial commitment in ensuring that it puts money to its mouth in terms of support, because obviously support in a vacuum is not defined, and so you keep saying support. And one would want to find out, are we making a financial commitment? Are we making commitments of putting boots on the ground? So if you could define the kind of support that South Africa will be providing, particularly following interactions with the Kenyan president recently as well, where this was on the agenda, so that when you go there, as you say you will, you go hand in your hand with some sort of commitments. Thank you, Chair.
Deputy President.
Well, up to so far, I'm not aware of any financial commitment that we've put on the ground, except providing refugee to one of the parties that were there. They were part of the fight. I think it took more or less 2 to 3 years. This one individual has been in the country under the watch of our security structures. And finally, we're happy to say this individual has been taken back to the country and is now part of the deputy presidents of that country. That is probably one assistance that we have given as a country, when any other country was not willing to provide that sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mukhalapa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy President, as a special envoy, you are aware that the conflict in South Sudan is mainly due to the internal politics of the SPLM, both in opposition and in government, and the former detainees, which threatens the peace process moving forward, and it can collapse the peace process. Do you agree with me that perhaps the 2 years of house arrest or the stay of Riek Machar here in South Africa has created a perception that the South African government has picked a side in this conflict, hence making sure that we are compromised? We don't have international legitimacy. Don't you think that South Africa should be withdrawn from the IGAD Plus process because we've already shown a conflict of interest, and there is a possibility that we can collapse the peace process moving forward? I thank you.
Deputy President.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker, I just want
Yes.
to check with
What
you.
are you raising?
Is it parliamentary? The Minister of Mineral Resource just recently become a member of parliament. Is it normal for him to howl like this? He's literally howling the whole day away. I just want to check, is it parliamentary? The guy needs to be taken again for his induction.
Honorable Member, it is unparliamentary for you to raise a non-point of order. Deputy President.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I think the decision to provide sanctuary to Riek Machar was not a decision of South Africa alone. That decision was negotiated among the countries that were trying to assist. And all these countries were aware that Riek Machar is in South Africa and looked after by South Africa. So our position as South Africa is not compromised. Instead, it has reinforced the peace process, because if Riek Machar was left there, maybe he could have died. Thank you very much.
The next supplementary question. Someone pressed Ndlozi's, Honorable Ndlozi's thing.
Yes, Chief.
But you have a seat that Parliament gave you.
Yeah,
Please
okay.
do it from there next time, okay? Go ahead,
Sure.
Honorable.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And Deputy President, the crisis in South Sudan and everywhere else in Africa today and the diminishing influence of South Africa in resolving African problems points to a dearth of Pan-Africanist perspective on the part of the current leadership of the country. What role should South Africa play in strengthening a Pan-Africanist solution to African problems? And what specific role should we be playing in strengthening the African Union to be able to respond to these challenges?
Deputy President. Now, as South Africa, we are part of the African Union, and we regard all the countries in the African Union as equal partners. We don't see ourselves as South Africa as big brother who must really give direction. When we are in the AU, we are equal partners. We respect their sovereignty as countries. And as much as we assist within the spirit of being a collective, and we don't impose ourselves as a country. And I'm sure that is the spirit that we want to conduct ourselves in the continent. So our participation in South Sudan has not been imposed. We participated and were requested by countries to participate. And some countries, as you have realized, they reject. They reject if you say we want to participate, they say we don't want so and so, we want so and so. I think it's one thing that we must resolve as the African Union in terms of how we want to deal with conflicts and how we want to deal with our own developments. And I'm sure gradually, as Africa, as a continent, we'll find one another. We'll find one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes questions to the Deputy President. Thank you, Deputy President. Honorable members, the next item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we move that the House notes the recommendations contained in the report of the Independent Commission for the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers of the 22nd of August 2018 on the pension and medical aid benefits of the former President, Mr. J.G. Zuma. 2, recognizes that upon retirement, the President shall be paid such pension and other pension benefits as may be determined from time to time by resolution of the National Assembly, after taking into consideration the recommendations of the Commission. 3, resolves that A, in terms of Section 25A of the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers Act, number 20 of 1998, upon the President's retirement from office, with effect from the day following the day that he vacated office, a taxable pension benefit be paid to him equal to 100% of the total annual remuneration, salary, and allowance payable to him the day prior to his retirement. B, in terms of Section 25B of the said Act, upon the death of the former President, with effect from the day of his death, a taxable pension benefit be paid to his widow or widows, dependent or nominee, including his or her estate, as may elect, equal to 50% of the pension benefit payable to the former President at the time of his death. C, the increase to the above benefits should be linked to the increase of the sitting President's salary. And lastly, in terms of Section 2C of the said Act, the state shall contribute the full amount payable to a medical aid scheme of which the former President or his widow or widows or dependent or dependents is a member. I so move, Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, I now put the motion. Are there any objections? There being objection, I now put the question. Those in favour say aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member.
The DA would like to make a declaration, please.
Okay. Go ahead, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. There's an old saying that when you're in an arena of wrongdoing, the best next step is to do the right thing. And if we're to act with integrity as this House, I think the question we have to ask ourselves, especially after the last 8 years, is simply this. Haven't we paid enough for Mr. Zuma already? The 10 million people who've been pushed into the unemployment queues because of his disastrous policies have certainly paid enough. The millions of our citizens who've had their futures and opportunities robbed from underneath them have certainly paid enough. The SASSA beneficiaries who have to now wait up into the early hours of the morning and snake around the post offices just to get their meagre grant have certainly paid enough. The citizens of the Republic of South Africa who continue to pay on a daily basis through the increases in VAT, tax hikes, petrol prices, and the cost of living to pay for the estimated 100 billion rand that state capture has cost South African citizens, have also certainly paid enough. This is a constitutional delinquent who has compromised not only this Parliament, but compromised the office of the presidency and compromised the Constitution of the Republic. Haven't we paid enough? We built a retirement village for Mr. Zuma at Nkandla. As the details that emerged from the Zondo Commission of the deep rot and deep tentacles that have extended from Nkandla to the union buildings through government departments to our state-owned entities, surely the price we've paid there is enough. The legal fees that we've had to fund over the 10 years as Mr. Zuma desperately fights for the day in court that he desperately wants by trying to avoid that day in court. Have we not paid enough for those legal fees? And the truth of the matter is that the constitutional wrecking ball that is Mr. Zuma has not stopped. Just this weekend, the chief whip of the African National Congress tweeted that there is a clandestine plot, which is the undermining of our state in its efforts to fight and reverse state capture, unquote. Why would we reward this man with an increase in his pension and increase in the salary? And if, as the ANC's head of economic policy, Mr. Enoch Gondwana said, that Mr. Zuma is responsible for what has happened, then why on earth would we want to reward this behavior by passing this recommendation in the House today? There are some amongst us today who will come to this podium and argue that this is Mr. Zuma's due. But following the law, we must pass this recommendation in the House today. But I would remind honourable members to look very carefully at the resolution that's before us today. This is not a directive, it's not an instruction, it is a recommendation to this House. And the people who passed this law and put this mechanism in place had in mind that it is this House and us as the elected members of this Parliament who are the representatives of the people of South Africa and custodians of the public purse and the Constitution would have to apply our minds in considering that recommendation. It means that this House has discretion, if it so wishes, not to pass this recommendation and to refuse it. The famed African author Chinua Achebe said that one of the truest tests of integrity is the blunt refusal to be compromised. The DA will not be compromised.
Deputy Speaker, we know for a fact that in terms of the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers Act, former presidents are entitled to remuneration equal to what they were paid before stepping down. But the reality is that Mr. Zuma does not qualify to be called a former head of state. He's a former head looter of the state. And as a result, should never, under any circumstances, qualify to be paid anything from the public purse. Under his tenure, our country degenerated to levels never thought possible before. Stealing became a norm, and corruption was institutionalized. As the Zondo Commission is beginning to show, there isn't any sphere of society Zuma corrosive influence didn't touch. We cannot with clear conscience agree to pay that man a salary until the day he pays his sins or called upon to the heavens by his ancestors. We must also not forget that Zuma didn't stand down willingly. He stepped down because we are going to impeach him for his destructive leadership. Were he impeached, he was going to lose all of these benefits. This is the man whom in this house was described in so many forms: a constitutional delinquent, a social scum, that corrupt, dirty element that hangs and feeds itself from the flesh of the nation. These are the names and the labels which the man was described with. We cannot stand here and condone that the man who stole so much from the public be honored and be decorated in the manner in which the ANC wants to decorate him. The EFF rejects this motion and asks that Mr. Zuma must not be treated as a former head of state worthy of our respect.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. I'm going to respectfully disagree with the last two colleagues that have come before us here. One of these days, sooner rather than later, all of us will become pensioners. Probably by the end of the 5th Parliament, we'll be in the category of those who are going to receive pensions from Parliament. And notwithstanding what we have done or not done, warts and all, and I look before 1994 to see what the administrators before 1994 did, yet they are collecting pensions from this government, this state, this taxpayers' money. I do believe that what goes round must come round. We have to be consistent in the manner in which we deal with this. And as I said, notwithstanding what Honorable former President Zuma has done, and we have been fierce critics of Honorable President Zuma from this very podium here, we must separate processes. The process of receiving a pension is a right. You have a family, you have everybody else. Why should they be denied receiving a pension because of what President Zuma did or he did not do? If Honorable former President Zuma is found guilty by a commission of inquiry or a court of law and he is required to pay back the money, then he must pay. But saying that he should be denied a pension at this point in time without due process having been followed is not, we believe, the right thing to do. So we would, in the circumstances, support this because we believe we should do not play the man, but you play the ball. And you look at the office of the President. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Likota.
My dear friends, if you will give me a chance to say something. The question before us is much more complex than some of us imagine. We are against what is being proposed because the individual we are discussing violated Section 89 of the Constitution and was found by the Constitutional Court to have broken his oath of office. Number one. Number two, Section 89 dictates that having committed such a serious violation of the Constitution, this House should have been given an opportunity to determine what to do with it. And he was protected by the majority, which itself was found to have broken its oath of office. Section 89 of the Constitution determines that if you were found guilty under that section, you are not entitled to any remuneration beyond your service. And for that reason, we insist that this question, it will be decided by men and women, where perhaps long before we are gone. But as long as the Constitution of South Africa reads as it is, this individual will not even qualify to have any pension payouts at all. I thank you.
Honorable member.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I agree with what Mr. Singh says, that we should respect the Constitution, and we should respect the Constitution, and specifically, we should respect the office of the President. However, there's a quid pro quo. The incumbent of the office should act in such a manner that we respect that person. And that is not what happened during the presidency of President Zuma. During the discussions on the Nkandla affair, I proposed in this House that the salary of the President should be reduced to R1. That is still my position. Now, Honourable Chairperson, if there's one person that has been enriched more than anybody else in South Africa, it's the former President, Mr. Zuma. He received a personal home to the value of 260 million rand, courtesy of the taxpayers. We paid for that. The ordinary people out there paid for that. What I found astonishing is that the ruling party, who are now paying the price for the things that happened in the last 10 years, and you're going to pay that price at the polls next year. You protected Mr. Zuma for the whole time. Today, you again try to do that. When are you going to stand up and do what is right? As long as you do this, you will be punished at the polls, and rightly so. We can never support this. We reject it with the contempt it deserves. Thank you.
Honorable Didiza.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, Deputy President, honorable members. The motion before the House, it's about determining the process of the payment of the former heads of state his dues in terms of our own legislation. And I think it's important for me to advise honorable members that this framework was decided by this Parliament. It may not be the fifth administration. It was determined by a Parliament. Secondly, it is determined by an independent body headed by a judge, Judge Musi in this instance, who then determines and therefore asks Parliament to execute that recommendation. Yes, I know, that's why I say so. And members here are raising issues. Obviously, politically, those are your views you share. And they don't necessarily mean you are correct. And I think we mustn't be selective in dealing with matters. Firstly, members are saying the Constitutional Court ruled in a particular way. Yes, we agree. But that Constitutional Court also ruled on Parliament, not on the ruling party. It said Parliament itself erred. And we read it. Yes. And I think we need to take that into consideration when we make those declarations. Secondly, this House, on numerous occasions, had an opportunity of having votes of no confidence on the president at the time. And indeed, those did not pass the test. So it cannot be correct standing here, determine the outcome, one, of a commission that has not concluded its matter. Secondly, base our decision on a court of law that has not resolved its matter. And all of those processes, at the time at which they determine, based on its outcome, yes, it's technical because we're dealing with a technical matter too. It's not only political, it's equally technical. As yourselves, as it comes to the end of the session, when we deal with your pensions, it will be equally technical. Therefore, as the ANC, we support the motion. And I think members must be honest. The whole issues of the determination on the security upgrades of the president and what the public protector determined, those were complied to. The ministers concerned dealt with the matters. Public Works reported in this parliament on what they did to deal with the officials and the contractors that were concerned. So it cannot be correct standing here and just say this happened and it was not done. Certain things were done. It may not be on our satisfaction, but I think, honorable members, we need to appreciate indeed where we're at, but we also appreciate on the things that we've sought to correct. Secondly, some of you are saying this president was this and this. Yes, it's correct, you may have that view, but he was not impeached. There was no process of impeachment that determined what Jew or not Jew he must get. And I think the ruling party took its own decision based on its analysis of the situation and recalled its deployees. And therefore, he was neither fired by this parliament or impeached. Thank you very much, honorable member.
Honorable members, I put the question again. Are there any objections? There being objections, I will now call for the bells to be rung for 5 minutes.
Well, Deputy Speaker, the DA calls for a division to help you. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have
Okay. Just notify them. Yeah.
the quorum requirement. And the majority of the quorum. Yeah. But we don't have a shortage.
Honorable members, please settle down. I would like to remind members that they may only vote from their allocated seats. When requested to do so, members must simply indicate their vote by pressing the appropriate button. If a member inadvertently presses the wrong button, the member may thereafter press the correct button. The last button pressed will be recorded as the member's vote when the voting session is closed by the chair. Members, even if you think or you say your button is not functioning, do press it. Do press it at the right time. No, not now. When you are invited to do so. When you are invited to do so, otherwise the table here will note your observations. Are all members in their allocated seats? Voting will now commence. Those in favor of the report, press the yes button. Those against, press the no button. Those wishing to abstain, the abstain button. Have all members voted? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. It's okay. Okay. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. You're noted. Honorable members, we can do without your noise. There's no abstention. There are 95 noes, and there's 197 yeses. The motion is therefore agreed to. The motion on the order paper is also in the name of the Chief Whip of the majority party. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we move that this House notes that the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces established the South African chapter of the Global TB Caucus on the 4th September 2018. Further notes that the House resolved the South African chapter of the Global TB Caucus would be coordinated by a body to be constituted in consultation with the whips of each party and provincial legislatures. And 3, resolves, perhaps I should ask for your indulgence at this point, Honorable Deputy Speaker, so that we don't come back to item 3. We intend amending this section, item 3, to read as follows. Resolves to establish, with the concurrence of the National Council of Provinces, a joint committee in terms of Joint Rule 15 to be the coordinating body of the South African chapter of the Global TB Caucus. The joint committee to consist of 11 members of the National Assembly and 9 members of the National Council of Provinces, be co-chaired by the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Health, Ms. M.L. Dunjwa, and the chairperson of the Select Committee on Social Services in the NCOP, Ms. L. Dlamini, included in the above composition. And lastly, the Joint Committee to exercise those powers in Joint Rule 32 that may assist it in carrying out its task. I so move, Deputy Speaker, with the amendment that I will hand over to the office.
Yeah, honorable members, I now put the motion as amended. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry on National Credit Amendment Bill.
Chief Whip.
Deputy Speaker, we move that the report of the committee be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? Yes. There being objections, I now put the question. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker, please note the objection of the DA. Thank you.
We will note the objections of the DA. The motion is therefore agreed to. The second order.
Second reading debate, National Credit Amendment Bill.
Honorable Fabs.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, honourable members of this House, colleagues and compatriots, fellow South Africans. For the first time in South Africa, the dignity of low-income workers and the poor who are over-indebted will be restored. The National Credit Amendment Bill intends providing urgent debt relief to South Africans who are not currently covered by the natural person insolvency and debt review systems. The ANC is of the view that as poor and low-income workers cannot benefit from any of these measures, this constitutes unfair discrimination based on socio-economic status and it also undermines the dignity of affected consumers. Debt administration, debt review, and debt counseling are offered. However, debt administration is costly, and debt counselors do not provide a service for people earning less than or equal to 7,500 because this is not cost effective. These measures effectively then exclude the poor from an insolvency or debt restructuring process, which is contrary to international trends and best practice. During the global financial meltdown in 2008, the National Credit Act saved South Africa from the worst effects, even while some first world economies were significantly affected. This debt intervention seeks to strengthen this act and enable the poor and low-income worker who is over-indebted to extract themselves from debt in a responsible manner. The National Credit Amendment Bill will encourage and enforce responsible lending and borrowing. This is brought about through a number of measures, including a capped intervention to promote a change in the borrowing and spending habits of an over-indebted society. Now, the provisions of the bill are numerous, but essentially, honourable members, the bill requires payment through restructuring of debt as the very first step in the debt intervention process. If the consumer cannot, despite all the restructuring, repay his or her debts within 5 years, the debt intervention process envisages a suspension of credit agreements, 12 months, 24 months. But there will be regular reviews. And finally, if after 24 months, the consumer is still not in a position to repay his or her debt, then extinguishing the debt or a percentage thereof is considered. I want to really emphasize, Honourable Deputy Speaker, that extinguishing debt is considered only after all other measures have been exhausted. A person who applies for debt intervention may not obtain further credit from the date of application. However, credit providers may not enforce debt from the date of application. I think what the important thing here to understand and appreciate is we did take account of ministerial powers that are given, and we said, look, let us not allow unfettered power here. So let us enable the minister to adjust the gross income and the amount of maximum unsecured debt to the extent that it must be in line with inflation. He may also introduce, or she, regulations that will provide for credit life insurance on all loans of more than 6 months or equal to and less than 50,000. I think what every member of the committee agreed with is that the bill now criminalizes illegal lenders, which is related to the registration requirements. When this bill becomes an act, unregistered lenders will be arrested for lending illegally. Now you wonder why this hasn't happened before. There wasn't such a clause. And up to now, enforcement officers have been forced to arrest such illegal lenders because of other prohibited acts, for example, holding people's IDs. Now, the whole idea, and members debated and deliberated on this for many, many days and hours. How do we ensure a fair and just process to strengthen this act? Credit providers remain an integral part of the process. Debt counsellors, contrary to public understanding, will not be prejudiced by the provisions in this bill because they do not service this target group of people whose income is less than or equal to 7,500 a month. Why? Well, in the submissions, it became apparent from their language that they considered this economically unviable. We need to ensure that the National Credit Act remains robust and continues to be a sound legislative instrument. We need to support an inclusive economy that is sustainable, an economy that retrenched workers and vulnerable people can participate. What about the powers of the magistrates? We learnt, having engaged with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, that currently under the Act, the magistrates have no power to reduce the interest rate or other charges because magistrates are bound by legislation when making an order. In short, what will this bill change? Magistrates will be empowered to reduce interest and other charges after following prescribed requirements. They will address issues like interest, etc., and make an order as to whether or not the interest can be reduced, perhaps up to zero, to enable consumers to repay their debts. There's also, how will we address it? We have heard of the millions of people affected by this. To give you some idea, we're not looking at just 100 people. We're looking at many, many more. Figures that have been bandied about go to millions and millions, and yet others, for example, don't go that far at all. But studies were conducted 2012, 2015, 2017. They were conducted not only by the National Credit Regulator, but also National Treasury, who used, one of the institutions they used was 80/20, a private institution, which gave them that information. Now, I think one of the important issues here is, first of all, should we continue to allow a group of people who are vulnerable not to benefit in the same manner or similar to others of us who earn more than 7,500. The decision of the committee to craft and develop such a bill was brought to this very House, the National Assembly, at which point all members of the committee were unanimous that we needed to draft and develop a bill that would address this challenge in a responsive and responsible manner. And may I say, at that point, everyone agreed. But of course, there were terms that we had to comply with. And then we look at the other issue about how effective will the process be? How are we going to deal with this? And we know very well that once a department has looked at a zero budget and determined what is required, its resources, it factors that in. And National Treasury then would be able to consider that. But also this House would be able to consider that request as well. The other thing that I think is important for us to take into account is currently what is happening to people who can't repay their debts. Some of them, in fact, many of them cannot even apply for jobs in order to enable them to repay the debt. So what we're doing here is to bring in a bill, because the ANC believes that this bill is essential for social cohesion, and it'll go a long way to strengthening the National Credit Act in a responsive and responsible manner. It empowers the poor, low-income worker, debt counsellors, and the magistrates. And I do want to appeal to all members, given the poor, low-income worker, debt counsellors, and the magistrates. And I do want to appeal to all members, given that in the legislation it requires for a review in this House to be presented, that all of us look at this very carefully before we vote in the spirit of the Constitution.
Thank you.
The ANC supports this bill.
Honourable McPherson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In 2016, the DA supported the goal of a committee bill that could produce outcomes that would help those that were deeply indebted. Almost from the get-go, the idea of a committee bill quickly dissipated and the real intentions of the ANC became apparent. This bill would quickly morph into an ANC 2019 election bill. At the very outset, the DA sought to assist the process by submitting a framework for debt intervention. This included trying to understand how the ANC came up with debt intervention available to people who earn a salary of 7,500 Rand per month with 50,000 Rand unsecured credit agreements. These figures are arbitrary and not backed up by any research or science. This would set the tone for how low-income groups receive debt relief. The ANC chose not to allow presentations from myself on the framework, but rather said that they would read it. We all know the ANC's track record when it comes to reading documents and reports. You simply can't call something a committee bill when you won't allow a committee member to engage in its formulation process. This was a red flag and a sign of things to come. From then onwards, it was a constant refusal by the ANC to take into account the very serious matters that were before us, instead marching towards its goal of debt must fall. Throughout this process, the ANC have chosen legislative expediency, using the fig leaf of being a party that represents the poorest of the poor to ignore any and all concerns. The banks have warned us, the micro-lenders have warned us, retailers have warned us of how bad this legislation is and how it will not reach its intended target. We believe that the wide scope of this bill could see between 2 and 20 million people apply for debt relief, with a potential cost to the economy of between 20 and 50 billion Rand, as well as creating a massive moral hazard and driving up realistic expectations ahead of the elections that consumers with unsecured credit will simply have their debts expunged. We also have no idea how the National Credit Regulator, which will compile the applications, is going to handle the deluge of consumers, because they themselves have no idea. Repeatedly, they and the National Consumer Tribunal, who will adjudicate the applications, were unable to produce concrete business plans or realistic budgets. The NCR was also unable to produce a template for its financial literacy program, which all applicants will be required to go through. How do you change consumer behavior towards credit if you don't have an education program? Even worse than this, it seems on the face of it that the actual implementation of this bill by the NCR and NCT could take 3 years, leaving debt-laden South Africans languishing in no man's land, as they would not be able to seek any other remedy once their application is made. The DA repeatedly requested a socio-economic assessment for this bill. Incredibly and without explanation, one has still not been done. In essence, the ANC wants to effect legislation to the credit market without knowing what the full consequences will be. It is quite obvious that these amendments are going to increase the cost of credit, as well as restrict access to credit for the poorest of the poor that the ANC claim to represent. With 10 million unemployed South Africans and an ANC-created recession, it seems completely insane that they would actively drive poor consumers into the arms of illegal lenders when they have no protection or recourse. That is why the DA throughout the bill proposed that we reform debt counselling to make it accessible to low-income consumers, which would then help them develop better credit behaviour, as well as keeping them in the credit market. We also still believe that the National Credit Act is a powerful piece of legislation that deals with reckless lending but hardly ever gets enforced by the NCR. We further propose that illegal lending is seriously acted on and that you cannot do so by just developing laws, but you actually have to have enforcement, which the ANC government continues to fail the public on. You need enforcement of the law to really protect consumers, and that's where the bill continues to fall short and continued to not take advice on this. This House should be aware, and we think it's important to bring it to all members' attention, of the massive internal battle playing itself out in the ANC over this bill. We know that the President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, and those in the ANC, including its head of transformation, Enoch Gondwana, who fully understand economics and their perilous state, the perilous state of our economy, are opposed to this bill. That's why the ANC committee was summoned to Lutuli House to explain itself. Sadly, the ANC committee members have chosen a blunt force, economic sledgehammering approach to debt reform that will only continue to enslave debt-laden and debt-poor South Africans from real credit reform. The DA will oppose this bill today. Thank you.
Honorable Ntangweni.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. You know, it's not amazed that the DA will oppose the bill because it will not serve the interest of white supremacy and white interest. It won't serve them. So it's obvious that they will oppose this bill. This bill, Honorable Deputy Speaker, it's a lifeline for a black person that is over-indebted by their capitalist behavior from Britain and all of that. So it's a lifeline for them that we will give to our black people out there that are over-indebted and that they put and continuously putting them into loans. The National Credit Amendment before the National Assembly seeks to give relief to workers who earn 7.5 thousand and below who are heavily over-indebted. The EFF welcome and support the bill, and even if the bill is only scratching the surface of highly indebted society workers are under so much pressure, any relief, however how little, will make a difference. While we support the bill, we are of the view that the committee have failed to use this opportunity presented by the bill to change what fundamentally is a structural problem entrenched in the exploitative banking system that the DA protects. When we went to Britain on a study tour as the committee, we learned in Britain that the credit market have taken active responsibility for they have put in their society into over-indebtedness. They have taken full responsibility, and the credit market have helped government as well so that the society can get out of indebted. But the DA don't want our black people to be in debt. They want us to always depend on them and go back and back and back, which is wrong. Here in South Africa, banks are doing quite the opposite. They come in South Africa, they don't even do a affordability test. They give you a loan. You apply for Wonga online, no affordability test is done, you get a loan. That is how our people are getting in and out of debt. And that is what the DA is protecting here today. But they do it deliberately because banks here, more money from you can go and tell that to your daddy. But they do it deliberately because banks here make more money from default charges, hiking interest because of defaults and loan books, which simply cannot be recovered. When African Bank collapsed, we thought it was going to be a lesson for both government credit regulators and prudential authorities. They ignorantly refused to take either lessons or responsibilities. Instead, they want to pretend like African Bank did not collapse because of their reckless lending, poor oversight, and greed. We have another African Bank waiting to happen in Capitec. They parodied themselves as a bank, but all they are is nothing but a mashonisa. Even if it's the office in the fancy office in Stellenbosch suburbs, Capitec is still a loan shark defended and protected by credited, regulated, the Reserve Bank and even National Treasury. The conduct of Capitec is reckless, destructive, and will make efforts of legislation redundant. They will continue to give heavily indebted consumers multiple loans, including more than a loan in a month. Instead of extending banking service to our workers and poor people in the edges of societies, banks like Capitec exploit customers with higher interest rates. Until we deal with the greedy banks, workers will continue to be exposed and the loan sharks and Mashonishi's shenanigans. We fully support this and we will support it, and the DA can go and report it at Stellenbosch.
IFP.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The bad news for the economy is that South Africa's growth over the years has hinged largely on spending, and because consumers are continuously driven in this current financial climate by feelings of anxiety about their ability to make ends meet, they are driven even more to desperate measures, especially in securing of more debt, which we all know is even more expensive in the process, more expensive money, that is. At first blush, the purpose of this draft bill seemed innocuous enough, a mechanism aimed at assisting consumers. But in reality, this proposed legislation, which in the face of it appears to assist over-indebted consumers, may prove to be a double-edged sword, and that it could in fact discourage consumers from managing their own credit responsibility. Excuse me. We can pretend or try to say that this bill does not provide for debts to be extinguished, but this is exactly what it seeks to achieve. Chairperson, South Africa are the highest borrowers in the world. Statistics shows that more than 10 million South Africans are in severe arrears on their existing debt. This bill will only result in credit providers restricting credit to populations where stability of repayment cannot be guaranteed, and in a result, in the lower income population seeking to obtain credit through informal channels, exactly what we are trying to prevent. And that's where legislation does not provide sufficient or practical consumer protection. A proper impact study was never really conducted on the effects of financial institutions and the acceleration of irresponsible borrowing. How will our already cash-strapped treasury assist financial institutions where there are massive defaults on loans? Where's this money going to come from? It's estimated that this could cost as much as 20 billion rand. Our financial institutions are already heavily overregulated and the bureaucratic burden grows every year. And now further new rules will be implemented in banks in this country, forcing them to build in defenses even before a loan is on default, which is not only going to affect the financial institution's capital reserves, but it will make it also difficult for anybody else to get a loan. It's become a matter of survival for the poor, which will not be good for the economy and the country as a whole. The IFP has given this serious consideration, and in this format, we just cannot support it. Thank you.
Honorable Imam Sheikh.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, honorable members. The National Freedom Party welcomes the report on the Department of Trade and Industry tabled here today. The National Credit, I know this is not going to give me a chocolate, but that's fine. The National Credit Amendment Bill tabled here today seeks to provide greater protection and debt relief to consumers who are not adequately provided for in the existing statutory sequestration, administration, and debt review processes. In the main, this particularly benefits creditors. Debt relief is clearly counterproductive as the term is extended. Monthly payments are reduced and the amount paid is extended over a long period, resulting in consumers paying, some of them all their lives, not forgetting the amount deducted by debt relief agencies as their own cost to render such services. Honorable Deputy Speaker, most of these consumers from poor households, which simply means that the lives of this category of consumers will only degenerate and never improve. Banks, financial institutions, loan sharks are ruthless and reckless because they're in the business of making money. And I think that is evident by the fact that the 4 major banks in South Africa just declared over 40 billion rand in profits for the last financial year. Now that will tell you how they are sucking the blood out of the bones of the poorest of the poor in the South African. Out of the bone, that's basically what they are actually doing. The other challenge that we seem to have is this, where we find ourselves with a lot of these illegal money lenders, loan sharks who hold the bank cards, the IDs, and recklessly lending our people. And you'll find in many of these businesses, on just the day after the all pay, when people get their social assistance, you'll find queues of people lining up there because their cards, their bank cards, their IDs are held by these people. And by the time they finish paying with that interest, there's very little left. The other problem you seem to have is this, that they are so over-indebted that the amounts that are deducted from their salaries, a major portion of it is going towards loans. So it's really not helping the situation. We welcome although we are concerned about extinguishing debt, but we welcome it on the basis that it might deter financial institutions and these illegal loan sharks from being reckless in terms of lending to the poorest of the poor. So this will also prevent more and more illegal loan sharks mushrooming as they are at this point in time. The National Freedom Party believes that this will actually restrict money lenders, it will benefit the poorest of the poor, it will stop the poorest of the poor taking advantage of these ads and advertising by businesses in wanting to give them. And what is happening is this, which is very, very important. These credit bureaus are selling the personal information to these banking institutions and others, and they are sending out messages encouraging people. The National Freedom Party will support the amendment of this.
Thank you. Honorable Minister of Small Business and Development.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm speaking here representing Minister Rob Davis, Minister of Trade and Industry, who is currently attending the G20 in Buenos Aires of Ministers of Trade. At the center of today's debate on the reading of the National Credit Amendment Bill is the ANC's quest to deal with poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The bill, Chairperson, also deals with giving dignity to our people. In fact, I was just thinking, Chairperson, that if we were to go back and ask how many of our people have suffered through buying things that they don't even need and the high interest rate that they've had to pay, you'll be shocked that some of these people sitting next here are the beneficiaries of that. And therefore, they must not make so much noise because they know perfectly well that the real intention is to empower our people who have been robbed for many, many years. The bill is an amendment to the National Credit Act of 2005, which came into effect in 2007, addressing and preventing over-indebtedness of consumers, ensuring an accessible, consistent, responsible, and equitable credit market is the mandate of the Department of Trade and Industry. The committee members have already dealt with the development of the bill, the target of the bill, the rationale for the bill. The bill aims to provide debt relief for consumers who are over-indebted. It will directly address the plight of poor and low-income workers who are over-indebted. Furthermore, it intends to encourage and enforce responsible lending and borrowing. The process of the development of the Portfolio Committee embarked on a rigorous, transparent, and open consultative process involving relevant stakeholders from industry, labor, NGOs, and others, relying on research studies from credible institutions such as the National Treasury that worked with 80-20 consultants. The Portfolio Committee established a subcommittee to ensure further work and robust deliberations on the bill and approached the National Economic Development and Labour Council, NEDLAC, to make a submission on the bill. The role of the Department of Trade and Industry, it plays a supportive role in the development of the bill, together with the National Credit Regulator and National Consumer Tribunal since 2016. The department participated in the deliberations, provided inputs to the policy context, participated in the public hearings, provided response to the public comments, and addressed technical issues throughout the process. Furthermore, the department provided a legal opinion on the bill and tackled issues of constitutionality which strengthened the bill. The content of the bill, of course, has also been dealt with by the members who have spoken here. The bill introduces a new effective and accessible debt counseling and personal insolvency framework for over-indebted low-income consumers. Approximately 38% out of 25 million credit-active consumers have impaired credit records. The bill provides a balance that addresses the needs of the consumer and promotes responsible borrowing by credit providers. The National Credit Regulation and the National Consumer Tribunal will be the implementers of the bill. The DTI will be strengthening the capacity of both regulators to ensure they implement the bill successfully. The two entities have experience and expertise in the credit industry. The bill will improve the collection and bad debt amongst over-indebted low-income consumers by credit providers. In South Africa, approximately 879 million of bad debt is collected by credit providers through the debt counseling on a monthly basis. The department supports that the National Assembly adopts the bill. We commend and congratulate the Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry for the balanced committee bill that will go a long way to close the gap in the credit market, to bring redress and restore dignity to the poor workers. And I know that many of you who sit on my left side, you have benefited from all the money that has been collected from black people. That's why you are not supporting it. That's why and you think that yes, you are beneficiaries. Our grandparents suffered because of your grandparents who made sure that they take all the money.
Order, Honorable T. Alberts.
Chairperson, how do you fix a complex problem? This was the question facing the MPs of this committee when confronted with the problem of over-indebtedness of poor consumers, especially those that do not qualify for debt counseling due to affordability factors. Wanneer mense 'n komplekse probleem bestudeer, moet holisties daarna gekyk word en in die geval moet gevra word hoe die ekonomiese omgewing lyk waarin arm mense hulle self bevind en hoekom hulle in die eerste plek arm is. Die antwoord om die armoedeprobleem op te los is geleë binne die ekonomiese omgewing. Die feit is dat armoede styg weens swak ekonomiese groei en daar bestaan 'n breë konsensus dat die regering se beleid van inmenging in die mark, wanbesteding en korrupsie die oorsaak daarvoor is. Given this context, it is abundantly clear that the creation of debt counseling processes for a population with an employment rate of more than 30% is merely placing a plaster on a terminally ill patient's wounds. It may help in the short term, but will not save the patient. Having said this, we must also emphasize that even the short-term benefits are uncertain. As this bill is a committee creation, there was no requirement to perform a socio-economic impact assessment study on the final bill before Parliament today. As such, the possible negative impact on the economic system is opaque, and we may face substantial unintended consequences, like the drying up of legitimate credit instruments and businesses with the concomitant loss of jobs and the proliferation of illegal credit as a response. Furthermore, if one has regard to the statistics on the current debt cycle, there are clear signs that debt is actually decreasing. South Africa is in the longest period of decline in household debt. Non-performing loans are in steep decline with a slight uptick during 2017. Debt judgment and summons are the lowest since data records began. It seems that people are managing their credit better, and the current debt intervention system might also be a contributing factor in that respect. Despite this good news, it is clear that only policy changes that facilitate economic growth will sustainably self-correct the debt problem. En wese het Suid-Afrikaners, veral die armes, werksgeleenthede nodig om volhoubaar uit die skuldkrisis te kom. Daarom moet die Departement van Handel en Nywerheid dus eerder introspeksie doen en 'n onafhanklike studie doen om te bepaal watter beleid in die pad staan van ekonomiese groei en volhoubare werkskepping. We want to help the poor, and we wish to see opportunities created for their advancement, indeed. However, by treating the symptoms and not applying the cure, we are prolonging the suffering and merely delaying an economic implosion given the current economic policy path. Therefore, unfortunately, we cannot support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ko Ahang, Honorable Williams.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Honourable Deputy President, Honourable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honourable Members, guests and friends, and most importantly, my fellow South Africans. Let me start by thanking all the parliamentary staff that helped with this committee bill. The amendment bill before us this evening will establish an arduous, structured, participatory mechanism that accelerates regulated economic transformation within our current legal system and constitutional framework. So while other political parties in this House shout and make populist statements as to get media coverage, the African National Congress is implementing South Africa's economic transformation policies. But the ANC cannot transform this economy alone. The African National Congress government is a participatory one, an ANC people's government, for the people, by the people. And therefore, the people of South Africa must wake up and see the poverty everywhere. There are even homeless people camping outside this very parliament as we speak. Imagine sleeping outside in the cold tonight. It is what the capital of France, Paris, must have looked like in July 1779, a decade before the French Revolution. We as a nation must put our national interest first. The growing massive divide between rich and poor in South Africa is not in the national interests. It is time to share. It is time to share in the wealth of this country. It is the time of the implementation of the Freedom Charter. This is the new dawn. We cannot implement the Freedom Charter in an ill-disciplined way, in a messy way, or in a violent way. This ANC-led government will implement the Freedom Charter through the National Democratic Revolution in a disciplined, regulated, participatory way. Let no one forget, the African National Congress is a disciplined force of the left. Kas Ku-Adia, the CEO of the Banking Association of South Africa.
Order, honourable members. Honourable Williams, can you take your seat? What's the point of order, honourable member?
I just want to check if it's possible for the honourable member to speak louder. We can't hear you.
Well, I think he's speaking loud enough. The level of the noise indeed has increased, and therefore it's incumbent upon all of us as members of this House to converse quietly and allow him to be heard. I'm sure if you do that, you'll hear him. Over to you, Honourable Williams.
Thank you, Chairperson. Kas Ku-Adia, the CEO of the Banking Association of South Africa, said in an ETV interview about debt relief bill on August the 28th, 2018, and I quote, "We interacted well with the committee on this, and we have given it a lot of input," unquote. The subcommittee on debt relief met in Parliament some 15 times, and the bill was discussed in the Portfolio Committee at least 60 times during the 2.5 years that debt relief was discussed. There were 3 rounds of public hearings, and some of those that appeared were invited to subsequent subcommittee meetings. Some banks were among those invited back as well. Barsa went on to say, "We believe," and I quote, "we believe that over-indebtedness is absolutely a problem," unquote. The Chief Executive Officer of the Banking Association of South Africa believes that over-indebtedness is absolutely a problem. Barsa went on to say that they want to continue working closely with Parliament, but want us to make legislation on the actions that banking is already doing on debt relief. The same actions that led us to the point of, as Barsa put it, over-indebtedness is absolutely a problem. No wonder we are in a technical recession if this is the attitude of our banking sector. They want us to make law their current broken voluntary debt relief system. Let me repeat my opening sentence. The amendment bill before us this evening will establish an arduous, structured, participatory mechanism that accelerates regulated economic transformation within our current legal system and constitutional framework. Now, there is an argument that says, why should the registered financial service providers pay for an ANC policy implementation initiative? And the answer is simple. When the room is flooding, does one put paper towels under the door to stop the water, or does one just walk in and turn off the tap? This country's poor are drowning in debt. Our people are suffering. So instead of just shouting about the problems, this ANC-led committee is doing something about it. The registered financial service providers are the source of credit in this, and this government will be dealing with the challenges of over-indebtedness at the source. Also, for the first time, unregistered financial service providers are being criminalized. This means that if someone makes money by lending money and they are not registered, then they are committing a criminal offense. If left to do as they please, the banks will lend until we all default, like in 2008 in the United States and in Europe. Legislation that is arduous, participatory, structures, and falls well within our constitutional framework, like this bill, is not only vital but necessary for there to be disciplined, regulated economic transformation. Transformation for all our people. All parties in this House should support and celebrate this bill, as this bill maps out our collective best way forward. Now, Honourable Chairperson, some members of Parliament have used Parliament as a way to tell South Africa who to vote for. Now, I'm not going to do that, but I would like to invite South Africa to join the African National Congress, as the African National Congress is the only place for our people. And I'm saying this because we are the people.
Order, Honourable Member, your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The PAC. PAC. APC. Hill Lewis, Honourable Hill Lewis.
You're just going to make me wait. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. In a constitutional, liberal, property-owning democracy, which is what we are, power is vested in institutions, not in individuals. And the ability of the state to act arbitrarily is deliberately circumscribed by the rule of law. This bill is bad because it gives additional arbitrary powers to the Minister of Trade and Industry and a handful of officials at the National Credit Regulator to set the terms on which people may apply for debt forgiveness, which is euphemistically in the bill referred to as debt intervention. This is a power that no minister should ever want. Once word spreads that this power is in the personal gift of the minister, people will be beating down his office door. If you thought that the Minister of Higher Education had a tough time dealing with fees must fall, just you wait for debt must fall. This bill is bad, secondly, because it will act as a powerful disincentive for banks to lend to lower income consumers, for fear that they will have to carry the cost of the debt write-off at some point down the line. This will have the perverse consequence of actually making it more difficult for those consumers to get credit, even if they can legitimately afford it. If they want credit, they will be forced to get credit from illegal lenders, most of whom charge interest rates of 30 to 50% a month. This committee should not pat itself on the back for bringing to this House a piece of legislation which pushes more people out of the formal credit market, forcing them to pay higher rates and making it harder for them to access credit. That is not something to celebrate. And the ANC knew this all along. That is why the chairperson was summoned to Luthuli House to explain herself and why this bill has been so divisive. I applaud the chairperson, Mrs. Fubbs, for standing up for the rights of Parliament, but I do wish she had chosen a better bill on which to do it. If the committee was serious about seeking debt relief, it would have seriously and earnestly insisted on follow-up action on African Bank. In 2015, I insisted that a full audit of African Bank's so-called bad book be done to sift out reckless credit. This was agreed to only after much resistance. It took nearly 18 months for the audit to be completed, but now that it has been completed in February this year, what has the committee done about it? Absolutely nothing. There are 2.3 million customers in the so-called bad book, most of whose credit was given to them prima facie recklessly. Why have every one of those credit agreements not been declared as reckless credit and written off, as the existing Act already empowers you to do? Why not achieve immediate debt relief of some 3 billion rand just by using the existing Act? This has not been done, nor will it be done, because the truth is, those credit agreements are now owned by the state, and the state is still collecting on them, still harassing those citizens for payment on those reckless loans, regardless of whether they were entered into recklessly and illegally or not. So it is simply not true that you are serious about providing debt relief. If you were, you could have, and you are not. You have done nothing about African Bank, and that shows the lie of this bill. Thank you very much.
Honorable Maslobo.
The chairperson of the session, His Excellency Comrade Didi Mabuza, the Deputy President of the Republic and the ANC, members of Cabinet and Deputy Ministers, members of this House, comrades and friends, fellow South Africans. On this day, on the 12th of September 1977, 41 years ago, one of our finest revolutionaries, Stephen Bantu Biko, was brutally killed by the apartheid government. And the regime, they thought by killing him, they will kill his ideals, and they failed. His ideals, they live amongst us, and they continue to inspire many generations of today and those that are still to come. The movement that carries the dreams and aspirations of many South Africans, the ANC, initiated this amendment as an intervention measure for relief of millions of our people who are poor and vulnerable workers. Our country, under the leadership of former President Nelson Mandela, inspired us to a shared dream of a truly united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society. The ANC, working side by side with our people, still believe that our country should be a land of endless opportunities, especially during this period of a new dawn. Even those who come from farms, villages, township, towns and cities should have the same opportunities that others they enjoy. The current insolvency system remains credit-orientated, and it excludes millions of our people, especially the working class. This system is discriminatory on the basis of socio-economic status, and it impugns on the dignity of the affected consumers. This is against the spirit of our renowned constitution, the right to dignity. Over the last few years, we've witnessed exponential growth of unsecured and illegal lending. If you read the National Credit Regulator report of March this year, you will see how the numbers they look. This was partly due to reckless lending by some creditors exploiting this gap market. The situation became worse due to the current slow growth, while the cost of living has risen and continued to rise. Our people deserve better, and they yearn for a good daycare for their kids, public schools, clinics, jobs, and safety to live without fear. We believe our parents must have a good retirement, and we will too, without the burden of over-indebtedness, hunger, want, diseases, unemployment, and inequality. I had a discussion in Mshengu with a Magagula in Mpumalanga in Bombela, who said to me, I quote, "My biggest headache go from one payday to the next, just like many in our country. I'm at the ATM early hours before deductions are made by creditors through my account and throw money to keep my family going. My wife and I combined income is less than 15,000 rands, and we worry more. Now, how are we going to pay for all the increases in municipal services like electricity, public transport, and food? I pray that my kids should not expand their body sizes, or else we have to pay for new clothes and special uniforms. My brother and leader, don't think we're ungrateful for what the ANC has done. Kumatima mfo, I close quote. I reassured Mr. Magagula and said, don't think our movement and the ANC has forgotten about you, but the ANC cares, hence this intervention will bring the required relief under the current economic climate. Mtombeni lapho ekaya, nabanye M17 emalokishini, emafam, lo mthetho sivimvinyo uzoletha ukuthi laba baninceda ngokuboleka imali bangadlali ngani. Some members of the parties in the House, they blame you entirely as if it's your fault in the conditions while you find yourself in, not appreciating that your families are falling apart and you suffer the indignity and become the skunk in the eyes of community. They say the ANC want to collapse the financial services sector and the economy. This is entirely further from the truth because they want to continue to defend an exploitative system that wants to maximize their profit at the back of the poor. The ANC is a leader of the society, rich or poor, black and white. We understand your plight, that you have to toil in difficult conditions to keep your families together, bring food, clothe the children. We know they are wrong because we live amongst you. We enjoy the pains together. Fellow members, we are a great nation and we have gone through hardships and adversity, but we remain resolute and indomitable. This amendment requires us never to pause in the pursuit of progress. The ANC calls upon you to rise for the sake of national interest and support this bill. History will look kindly on those with resolve, determination, and commitment to a just and equitable society. It will not wait for these ones who are hesitant, apathetic, the doomsayers that are sitting on our left, who are shy of a challenge. Our heartfelt gratitude and thanks goes to the Secretariat, DTI, National Treasurer, COSAT, and other labor movement, civil society, ANC study group, ANC, NEC, ETC, and other parties in the Portfolio Committee for the journey traveled so far. As the ANC, we support this amendment. I thank you.
Thank you. Order, honorable members, that concludes the debate. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? I now put the question. Order. I now put the question. Those in favor will say aye, and those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Chairperson, the DA calls for division. Thank you.
Order, honorable members. A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 5 minutes.